All right, it's 4:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. We have quorum. Welcome to all members of the public who are here today. I would just remind you this is not a public participation meeting, which means you won't be asked to speak, but also in addition, any clapping, booing, or anything like that. We try to refrain from that here and have respectful conversation, so hopefully that'll be the case. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest before we get started? There being none, there are no scheduled items. We have one consent item, which is the fourth report of the Rapid Transit Implementation Working Group. Any questions? Somebody prepared to move that? I'm not in yet. Moved by Vice Chair Ruth. Seconded by Councillor Helmer. All in favor? That matter is passed. We'll now move to the items for discussion. The first matter is the staff report, which is a summary of the public information meeting. Mr. Hayward has asked if he could speak first on this issue, I think generally in another way, and unless the committee has any difficulties with that, I'd like to give Mr. Hayward the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being new to the acting city manager role, and I still have the responsibilities of my treasurer role, it's been a very busy last 3 weeks. One of the biggest issues that have erupted, obviously, is the rapid transit project. And my observations over the last couple of weeks is that there are a lot of different people who are talking about the project, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And that's creating fear, and it's unnecessary. We need to just take a deep breath, and because construction's not happening tomorrow. I just want to reset the stage so everyone can see where we're at. The project started in 2006, actually, at the LTC, and I remember that because I was there. Not working at the LTC because Kelly wouldn't have me there, but that's... 3 years ago, the City of London moved forward on making it a priority, and they engaged a team of nationally recognized consultants. There have been over 100 plus meetings. There have been over 14,000 Londoners who have participated in the information or engagement sessions. And we're currently at the stage where administration and the consultants have recommended preferred routes. Although many routes were considered, the recommended routes form the background of the business case for the project. Now, I understand that many people want to see the alternate routes and why administration is recommending the routes that are before you. And there are people here tonight who can provide you that information, so I encourage you to ask those questions and bring that forward. But council gets to make the final decision on routes. So the final decision on routes has not yet been made. They're just recommended by the administration. If, though, changes to the routes are desired or council wants more study, you should know that the business case that's been submitted to senior governments will have to change. Recently, also, there were a number of downtown issues that were raised. Staff will outline a plan tonight to help us get to those affected and talk with them. We certainly need to get those concerns heard and addressed because those businesses are valuable to this city and we don't want to lose them. There are lots of issues, lots of misinformation. And so what we have for you tonight, rather than doing the 3 agenda items, there's one lengthy and very comprehensive presentation. And I'd ask that you let the staff and our consultants finish before you get to any questions. Because they may be able to answer those questions, and obviously there will be lots of questions afterwards. I'll close by saying it's not just about transit, but this is about delivering on the London plan. This is a transformational project, and with that comes change and challenges. These challenges will have to be overcome, which we can do if we all work together. And with that, I'd, through the chair, maybe leave it to you to decide whether we can do the presentation or not.
Just so I'm clear, because it's been an ongoing issue with this committee. First of all, I don't need to remind you this is a committee of council, not a staff committee. I know you know that, but I think sometimes it should be repeated. We received an agenda with 3 separate items on it. I met with Mr. Soldo yesterday to review and confirm that agenda. It became pretty apparent to me during that meeting that there were additional matters that you may want to talk about, you may want to present to us. Somebody talked about a communication plan being presented to us. Somebody told me the director of planning wanted to talk. And the concern, and we'll go to committee, and committee can decide, but just as a chair of a committee, it's very difficult to chair a committee where I don't know what's going to be presented by staff at the meeting. And quite frankly, that's been a consistent challenge with this committee. And I hope you appreciate that the members of this committee contact me and say, what's going on, Mr. Chair? Why aren't we getting reports in advance? Why are the presentations not matching up to what we were told? So I'm not going to make the decision as to how we proceed from here, but I just wanted to express my concerns and a little bit of frustration as the chair of this committee. In that how information is being presented to us. Because I know it doesn't take any reminding, but this is a committee that was formed by council and voted on by council expressly so we could make sure that not only we were getting information, but also the public is getting information. And frankly, I think to some extent, because of my not being diligent enough in pursuing staff on this issue, I think we failed to some extent in conducting this discussion in an orderly and forthright manner. So having said that, I hope that staff will pay some heed to what I'm saying. Not optimistic at this point, but I hope staff pays some heed to what I'm saying. So I'll open the issue up to the rest of the committee as to whether they want to speak.
Well, I say this respectfully, and it's difficult to have the conversation with you and the chair, but respectfully, you're wrong. This isn't a committee. This is a working group. It's a working group that was put in place by council. It includes members of the LTC, it includes members of council. And we don't have the ability, like one of our standing committees, to make recommendations to council. We can forward our comments onto a committee. And I think that we need to get that straight. I'm really unclear about why you're directing your comments so aggressively, I guess is the word that I would use, to staff at this point. I know that this is a contentious issue. This is an issue that we need to have a conversation with our community. It's one that we've been having a conversation for well over a decade, and we're not at a conclusion of that conversation yet. But respectfully, Chair, what I think I'm going to ask you to do is lower the temperature and to allow our acting city manager the ability to do his job, to provide information, professional information to this working group, so that then we can have a political debate. But I don't think that there's any reason why we need to take shots at staff at this point. I think what we need to do is hear that information and then around this horseshoe have a conversation both between LTC members and members of council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. Councillor Park?
Thank you. So yeah, this conversation, I would say the temperature is quite high, and it's not just with us down here on this floor, it's in the community. And I've said in the media myself that it's a communication breakdown from us down here, from some folks in our civic administration, but also members of the community. So what we're here to do today is to get some information. A lot of it is thankfully in the report, and apparently there's some more coming forward, which the more information that we have in a good way that everybody understands it, whether we have a PNG or not, the better. I share some of the frustration that Councillor Squire has in terms of how we're moving forward with this project in the community. I think that we're going to have that debate about how we're going to move this forward, and it is going to move forward, but for me it's a matter of where the rubber's hitting the road in my ward and making sure that everybody in my ward is educated on the subject. So let's all dial it down. I'm happy to start that. I got some chamomile tea here. It's a good day.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm listening to these comments, and I've been listening to a lot of talks on the news and the radio and the television over the past few weeks. And my philosophy about this is pretty much what the mayor says. This is from my perspective, it's a working group. And we got to be careful that, that we don't handle it as if it's a standing committee or if it's council. When we formed this, we formed it because we as a council wanted to follow up, from my perspective, wanted to follow up on how the project was progressing, particularly the environmental assessment. And we are still, from my perspective, in the environmental assessment stage. And I don't see a final presentation to us as yet. I see progressively things coming forward to us at each of these meetings, and I pay attention to that. And sometimes, yes, I do get the feeling that we're handling this as though when we receive it, it's approval. But when I receive it, I don't consider it approval. I consider that there's room for discussion. So when we took what we had at that stage out to the library, for me, And I got there a little later than some of you because I was at another meeting first, like some of us. And I paid attention to what was there. And what was there was what was presented to us at that time. But I did not consider it formal. And I consider that part of the reason we are there was to hear what the public had to say and come back and see if we needed to make some adjustment, or at least for staff to pick that up and make some adjustment and come back to us, or tell us what it is and allow us to make some suggestions. I don't see anything written in concrete as yet. I still see it at that stage. I'm not going to get heated about it. I empathize with everybody who says this and that and the other because I quite understand their situation and their experience or their fear of what might happen in their environment when it's done. And I am not stopping anyone from making suggestions or passing on recommendation or giving their opinion. I think that that's essential at this point in time. But I didn't see that we were stopping anybody. I didn't see that we said, this is the way it is and there is no change. If anybody tells me that there's no change, then I totally disagree with that because I've been to all these meetings and from my perspective, I was of the opinion there is room for further discussion on anything, including wherever we're going. Yes, we have pretty much a route, an east-west, north-south route. There's here and there and everywhere, and there are parts of it that we know that the roads are too narrow. But I expect that we're going to work on this, and when that is final, then we're going to present the final thing to the public. But I don't want to get heated about this. I want to hear what staff has to say with this, and if we need to make some changes, some suggestions, we're going to move on with that. But I don't see this final yet. And like the mayor said, to me, it's still a working group. It's not a standing committee. But it's here that we need to do some discussions. And I want it to be open so that we could have that discussion. The last thing I want to point out, Mr. Chair, is that this is for London. This is a project that is for London. You know, I do respect my colleagues who say, well, it's in my ward. It's not in anybody's ward. It's in London. It passes through just about every one of our wards. And when it comes to downtown, I want to make it clear that I have just as many of my constituents using downtown transportation as all of us here together. So we are all in this together. I don't want any one person to think that they're going to take responsibility because it's in their ward. It's in all of our wards. It's a London project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Can we move to the issue of whether we're going to have one presentation or three presentations? Because that's the issue at hand. If we could just focus on that for now. I'm sorry, Mr. Shepherd, Commissioner, sorry,
That's
my
fine.
memory.
Thanks very much, Chair. I very much appreciate the fact that this is a working group and not a formal standing committee of council. And if we're going to cover what's on the agenda, then I'm happy to be flexible and have it as one presentation instead of three. It's a working group. We're very accustomed to having information come in at, kind of at a late date, and I'm fine with that. And because it's a working group and we want to know the best available, most current information. And especially tonight when we've got so many people in the gallery, to hear what we know and what we can share. So I'm fine with a slight change in format as long as we're going to cover the same content. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you. Just briefly, I'm delighted to see so many people in the gallery after being a member of the LTC Long-Term Working Group and for a number of years where it felt like us four and no more in the room. Delighted that people are here, delighted that people have engaged on this significant topic. And I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking of the definition of a Gordian knot. I guess the question with that, is it's defined as a problem that's insolvable in its own terms. The question we have is who's going to be Alexander the Great to cut the knot? And I think that's what the community has to do. We together will have to be the one that wields the sword to cut that knot that's very difficult to untie. So that's my metaphor for where we're at after reading the reports, Mr. Chair. I'm glad that people are here. We have an issue. with LTC. We've talked about it, quite frankly, as long as I've been on council, 10 years. We need to move people and goods around our city in an efficient and effective way. And to the point, I want to follow up on my friend's comments here. It's a working group, so let's get to work.
Is somebody prepared to make a motion that we hear one presentation then from staff? Councillor Hopkins, seconder, or did you want to speak?
I'll be happy to put the motion to accept
Okay.
the
We have a seconder?
presentation.
Commissioner Shepherd? So the thing about names I have, even my children, I'm telling you, I don't get their names right. Yeah, any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? All right, staff?
Thank you, through the chair. And I'll start with providing some clarity. This is one presentation that covers the 3 items in front of you. There's no new information. This is strictly about the 3 items in front of you here. So we will have multiple speakers that will be speaking to this tonight. Myself, Mr. Fleming, the 2 consultants, Mrs. Pelechny, as well as Mrs. Scher. I'll go back to the purpose of this working group. It really is to provide you with an update on what we're doing as a technical team, to provide you an overview of the evaluation to date that we've undertaken for King Street and Richmond Street. I'm going to start off with a broader perspective as it relates to rapid transit. The London Transit Commission, as you know, has been working on setting the groundwork for a long-term transit strategy since 2006. A number of you have been involved in that. And bus rapid transit has been discussed here at the city since 2011. The implementation of rapid transit is a core principle behind the Transportation Master Plan. Moving people in a more sustainable, environmentally friendly manner through an enhanced transit system is fundamental to the future growth of our city. We cannot continue to have residents primarily use their cars. We need to shift them into transit by providing a more reliable, faster, frequent service that makes transit more competitive from a travel time perspective to the automobile. That can only be achieved by developing a rapid transit system that gives priority to transit, running them in dedicated lanes and removing roadblocks to reliability. Given that we are a city where the transportation system is constrained by rivers and railways, there are a limited number of corridors that provide access across the city and into the downtown. The development of routes was based on council-approved principles and policy directions that have been developed through the Transportation Master Plan, the London Plan, Downtown Plan, Cycling Master Plan, and approved environmental assessments such as Dundas Place, and having regard for other initiatives such as Back to the River. The analysis of these routes has taken into context all of these initiatives and should be looked at from a citywide perspective, not on an individual corridor basis. So what we want to do next is provide you an overview of the general context of rapid transit and how it relates to some of these plans. And I'm going to be asking Mr. Fleming to provide that presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Edward. And as Edward pointed out, I do want to give you a bigger picture perspective, take you back to some of the work that we've done as a municipality relating to city building. And I want to talk about rapid transit and city building and how those two fit together very, very much in an inextricable way. I think from a long-term planning perspective, London is at a fork in the road. And the decisions that we make as a municipality today will not only affect today and our population, our community today, but very much this is a generational kind of decision, one that's going to affect generations to come. And council has been very busy working on these generational changes. and these plans that will in fact, as the slide says, transform the way we grow and the way that we move. Two very fundamental things that a municipality does. Now we know that anytime we're making big changes like these, they're very hard, but we also know it's possible. And I just give a couple of examples here. Transit ridership in London has grown by 94% between 96 and 2014. And I was a planner back here in 1996 with a heck of a lot of hair on my head. And 12.4 million rides, and we were scratching our heads thinking, how are we going to get ridership, the modal shift to change? And there was a lot of discussion, there was a lot of hand-wringing. And in fact, while we're not where we need to be, look what's happened since 96. We've almost doubled the number of rides in transit that's occurring in London. When you're looking at big picture and long-term change, we also need to understand that there's demographics behind that. And some of the work that we did in the London plan speaks to this. For example, 1 in 3 Londoners are millennials, born between 1980 and 2000. That's now the largest cohort in our city. And it's bookended to some degree by the baby boom, and some of those young boomers who, like the millennials, are looking for different ways to move around. And certainly the millennials are looking for cities that give lots of choice, real choice, around how to move, how to connect within their city. In the London plan, we talk about 2035, again, 20 years ahead, now 19. 115,000 people is what's projected or forecasted to live within a 10-minute walk of London's proposed rapid transit lines. Think of that, 115,000 people living within easy walking distance of those rapid transit lines, and 84,000 people working within 10 minutes of those lines. And just to get a sense of those rapid transit lines and how, again, from a city building perspective, they relate to those important employment nodes, just looking at, for a moment, at our academic, our research, and our medical institutions shows that we're going to, through rapid transit, connect all of those, and we're connecting them all to the downtown. So you get a sense from this slide, you see the core, the downtown is where all roads meet. You can see the Fanshawe College downtown campus, as well as the campus out to the east that will be connected. You can see that those will be connected to the university. They'll all be connected to all of the hospitals. This is a powerful plan for connecting the important pieces, many of the important pieces in our city, and there's many more. And this is what it looks like right now from an employment perspective. The bigger the red dot, the larger the concentration of employment. Look at how those rapid transit corridors will connect those significant employers in our city. Look at that employment in our city. Look how centralized it is. Look how it is so focused on the core, and how our rapid transit system, as we're planning it, it is going to connect all of that employment to the broader city. So while change is hard, there's a lot at stake. And these are some of the things that are spoken to in our city building documents: our climate, our environment, energy conservation, our agricultural lands and the conservation of those lands, small business development, our financial sustainability as a city, urban regeneration, our ability to attract talent, and the economy that drives from that, and our personal health. So when people ask, what does rapid transit do for me? Well, you only need to look at what rapid transit makes possible that addresses these issues, not just for Londoners today, but in the future. So there has been a lot of planning that's been going on as a municipality, and council has dealt with a significant and put in place a significant city building framework in preparation for rapid transit. And so at the top of this diagram, you see Smart Moves. That's the Transportation Master Plan, and that went roughly 2011, I think 2012 it began. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but that was really the beginning of the discussion around multimodal transportation planning. The London Plan, which this council just recently approved and is now ministry approved. The Downtown Plan, which this council approved, and the Back to the River and My Dundas transformational projects that stem from that downtown plan. the London on Bikes plan, which comes from the Smart Moves Transportation Master Plan, and of course, the Shift Rapid Transit discussion that we're having today, and that notion of how that weaves into the overall framework. And finally, a parking strategy which is another piece in that sort of quilt of policy and city building strategies that have been very much inclusive of the public all the way through. So the Transportation Master Plan, it really, for the first time, says we have options for how we move. Auto-dominated status quo doesn't work anymore. Is that something that's just being said in London, Ontario? Absolutely not. This is throughout North America. This is what municipalities are grappling with, they're understanding, and they're making plans to address. They understand that the auto-dominated status quo way of moving promotes sprawl, creates air pollution, it's a huge energy consumer, it creates all kinds of future risks should energy costs rise, or something like carbon taxing really start to impact the cost of moving around using carbon fuels. It creates it undermines the ability to provide quality transit services when we build in auto-dominated ways. It's bad for personal health. It comes with huge costs, both the initial costs of putting roads in place and the ongoing costs of maintaining them. It's expensive for users. It's unsustainable, really, is the summary, environmentally, socially, and economically. And now I want to talk a little bit about this last point. And remember, it's only one point amongst many here. But this is what the Transportation Master Plan said. This is why we need to move away from the status quo. And one of those points is unresolvable congestion. And before I go there, I'll just say that some have said that this notion of congestion, and I'm sure you've heard the quote and it's put differently at different times, but solving congestion by widening roads is akin to solving obesity by loosening the belt. It's not getting at the root issue, and it's not really resolving the problem. Former Mayor of Mississauga, Hazel McCallion, kicked off the Shift Rapid Transit initiative, speaking at the Wolf Performance Hall, and said that her greatest regret in all of her work and all of her city building is that she did not focus on transit, that she focused on the car, and she feels that it's led to a city that is much worse off than it would have been had she taken the alternative approach and focused on transit, rapid transit. So let's talk about that congestion for a moment. This came from the Transportation Master Plan. Some 57% of travel in the city occurs during the morning and evening peak travel periods. 60% of all of our travel is within that period, with almost 1/4 of the daily trips being work-related. Commuter travel directs much of the need, so that's what's driving the need for road infrastructure improvements. So, remembering that you have this enormous crush of demand during peak periods, we need to look at what the physical requirements of an automobile are. To move 72 people, this is how many cars you need. This is the kind of space that takes up. Think about that road allowance. Does it matter whether it's an autonomous vehicle or not, or a human driving it? No. Does it matter whether it's environmentally conscious in terms of the emissions or not? No. It takes up that much space. This is how much space a bus takes up. So when you think about all of that traffic that's occurring during that rush hour period in the morning and the PM peaks, think about what a bus can do to relieve that congestion. Think about what rapid transit can do to reduce the requirement for road allowance widening or road widening. Think of what it can do for the person that continues to use the car and the much more pleasant experience of being out of that kind of traffic congestion that's driven by the use of the car. The third point I want to make to the right here is that all of those cars on the left side need to park somewhere when they come downtown or some other employment node. And think about the space requirement for that versus that bus, which requires all of those 72 people, requires no parking. So recognizing that in order to get people out of their cars on the left and into a bus on the right, we need to not only talk about captive riders, those that must take the bus, but those that have the discretion. Those that are discretionary riders, they have a choice. It needs to be a premium service. In order to be a premium service, in order to get discretionary riders out of their cars and using transit, there needs to be reliability. You need to be able to go out to your transit station and stand at that station and know that there's going to be a bus there in 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. It needs to be reliable. In order to do that, you cannot operate in mixed traffic. And certainly leave the details of that to the engineering folks in the room. Similarly, on the right, if you think about reliability, we've all been at this crossing, I think, on Richmond Street, and understand that what it means to be there, stopped and looking at a train going by. What would that do for rapid transit reliability? It's not possible to have that kind of reliability. And I can also think of a rapid transit situation with headways of 5 minutes between vehicles where a bus is stopped at the tracks and another one pulls up behind it. And maybe another one after that. That's stacking. That has occurred in other cities, and that completely obliterates your network reliability as well as your cost efficiencies. So the Transportation Master Plan was a new approach. It's a multimodal approach, less reliance on the automobiles, not suggesting everyone takes transit, but in fact making both, or sorry, I should say all modes, all options for moving from A to B more enjoyable, more practical and convenient. It said in doing rapid transit, you realize environmental benefits, those active mobility options. You also get some of that growth of your city stimulated, assist with urban regeneration. And I think importantly, this last point, it avoids significant widening costs. And so I pulled from a report, an existing report through the Transportation Master Plan that cited there are $290 million of road widening expenditures that we avoid through rapid transit. And that's by using those dedicated lanes and getting people out of their cars. So now on to the London Plan. These are the 10 big moves. I think you have all seen them, but the point I want to make is that the London Plan relies on rapid transit. Look at the first big move, shaping our city around rapid transit. I won't go through all of these. Think about the growing inward and upward, number 4. It's great to say we want to grow inward and upward. You need an infrastructure like rapid transit to encourage that, to stimulate that form of growth. Giving real, number 6, and attractive mobility choices, walking, cycling, transit, and others. Building strong and healthy neighborhoods for everyone, including those urban neighborhoods, and connecting them. And building one of the greenest cities in all of Canada. Those are some of the elements of the London Plan, but these 10 big moves really are linked to rapid transit. So the London Plan shows our municipal boundary, our urban growth boundary, our built area boundary. And it says within the built area boundary, we are expecting 45% of all of our residential growth, 45%. And you as a council have also set a target, so these are both targets, 45%. You've also set a target of 75% of all of that intensification to occur within the primary transit area, shown in that dark shading. How do you make that happen? It's great to have a target. How do you make it happen? Well, a big part of it is providing rapid transit. That's what's connecting the entire primary transit area, but it's also providing that stimulus for growth and development along those corridors, at transit stations, and in the transit villages. We've also, through the London Plan, assigned planning permissions for greater height and greater density along those corridors. So you can see here is the downtown, the focus of it all, and the rapid transit corridors that link them. So greater heights, greater densities along these corridors are permitted. There are some exceptions for heritage areas, for example, and some of the areas that are constrained by floodplain. But it gives you a sense that we've aligned the London Plan to rapid transit and shows how closely related they are. So I'm coming to the end of my presentation, but I want to just make the point very clear that the London Plan and these types of policy directions in the London Plan are directly related to rapid transit, stimulating inward and upward growth, encouraging growth that uses existing infrastructure, encouraging transit-oriented growth, conserving agricultural lands, reducing carbon emissions, reducing energy consumption, alleviating congestion. These are all in the London Plan, supporting active forms of transportation for healthier lifestyles. Attractive mobility choices, stimulating growth where it's most advantageous, regenerating urban neighborhoods and our main streets around them, creating small business opportunities, connecting our institutions, reducing the personal cost of mobility, and creating a more resilient city. Rapid transit can also help us attract talent to London. So while you are considering through the discussion today, alternative routes, another point I'd like to make is within that mosaic of the different policy projects and that city building framework that's been established by yourselves as a council, remember that it's an integrated network that we're talking about, and changes to benefit one objective can have a negative impact on another objective. So it's really important that you don't just look at one route or one section of one route without understanding how it relates to the larger integrated network. So for example, the Flex Street, this is a big part of the overall picture. The EA is completed. I think we're working towards a 2018, I'll look to Doug here, 2018 completion date. This is an important part of your plan moving forward, and it's important that it is respected through the consideration of different routes. Let's not forget about the leg that is west of Rideout and how important it is that we don't have, that it is a pedestrian-oriented space as part of Dundas Place, and that we don't have large volumes of cars running through it. To the same point, here is the Back to the River project, again, moving forward through the EA process. And let's remember, this is to be a highly pedestrian-oriented space, one of the preeminent spaces in all of London, a signature space, and we don't want to have a major traffic flow through here of personal automobiles. This is dedicated for rapid transit. This is, as a transit way, is something that will have much less traffic volume and number of vehicles than it would if it was catering to automobiles. Similarly, there are the cycle tracks, and within the downtown, again, coming out of the Transportation Master Plan, this notion of cycle tracks, this one on Queens Ave, is really key and needs to be understood as also part of that objective of creating mobility choices, attractive, safe mobility choices. So the last thing I want to speak to, and then I'll sit down, is while it's understood that this is the big picture and the long term, and it's critical we keep that in mind, it's also about understanding what impacts there may be associated with construction, and these are the shorter term perspectives. And I won't speak to this in any detail, but I will say that parking strategy coming forward is one opportunity for you as a council to potentially address some of those parking issues that might be identified through the rapid transit process. Not just construction, but also longer term. And a senior planner in my area pointed this one out to me, and I hope it might be helpful to you as a committee, or as a working group, is that Banff had a major construction project that they had to deal with in their downtown where they were replacing infrastructure. They have approximately 20, we spoke to this group today, 20 to 40,000 new guests arrive in Banff every day in their downtown area. And the issue is, how do you deal with that? These people, this is very much a tourism-based economy, and people live and die on that tourism population. How do they deal with it? Well, they branded the project Banff Refreshing. This was a positioning from a marketing point of view. They created a festival-like atmosphere to keep visitors in the downtown core. They had all kinds of construction efforts like bridge crossings and marketing strategy to mitigate business issues in the core. What they reported out on and what we saw and heard from them was that Banff business did very well through the Banff refreshing process. Restaurants reported an increase in volume, and business reported marketing efforts positively impacted their business opportunities. Is that to say that that's what we should do here? Not necessarily. Is that a panacea? Not necessarily, but I think it points to the possible opportunities of addressing with, and the importance of addressing the construction issues, the shorter term issues with the businesses in the area. Summing up then, rapid transit really is all about the London Plan in terms of the city building, being used as a city building tool, and I hope I've been able to show that to you today.
Mr. Soldo, I wonder if, just to give us some time guidance, how long do you anticipate the staff presentation will be in total? We're now 40 minutes in.
I anticipate that will be another half an hour at a minimum.
Thank you.
I will say that's probably the shortest presentation I've ever seen Mr. Fleming give, so. So I'm just going to summarize a little bit about the evolution of rapid transit. We spoke about it briefly. It's been on the table here at the city for quite some time. The downtown London BRT routing option study, some of you may recall that. I know some of you were on the LTC at the time that looked at that. John had indicated 2013 London Transportation Master Plan, which looked at a number of different corridors. The EA, as you're all aware, kicked off back in February 2015. We've had a significant amount of evaluation done through this process, as well as public consultation. There's the Our Move Forward, our London's downtown plan, which provided the overall framework, as John has indicated. The rapid transit business case, this council dealt with that back in May of 2016. It did identify full BRT as the preferred option, and that identified routing in the downtown. It included a tunnel, the grade separation on Richmond Street. The London plan, as indicated, as well as some of these other studies, which really go into the context of how we determine the various routing options. So what I'm going to do now is ask Mr. Hollingworth to come up and give a brief summary of the things that we heard at the Public Information Center last week.
Thank you, Mr. Soldo. This part of the presentation will be quite brief. I believe that this was presented in your package and, of course, will form part of the documentation of the master plan as an appendix. But as you recall, if you were there, we had a very robust public information center, and as far as PICs for strategic plans, it was very well attended. 197 people signed in. By our estimation, between husbands and wives and the like, it was probably closer to 400 people that actually attended. It was a drop-in style format, and there was lots of staff and consultants there to answer questions, and I think quite a lively discussion. We have since received a number of comment forms, 50 to date, and they still keep coming in. The emails keep coming in, which is great. The tweets we're following. We're recording all those, and we'll be providing formal responses as required. And again, all of these communications will form part of the documentation of the environmental assessment. I'm not going to interpret the comments here. These are pretty much taken as given from the comment forms and from some of the key conversations. We've broken it down into different topics, and the first one related to the route selection. And I think this is, really top of mind for people at any stage of a project. So some of the questions we got were, why not King Street? Why not York Street? What about Queens? What about Dundas? Questions about Richmond Street versus a Western Road to Oxford. And a lot of other different route options right over to Woodward Street, which is west of Warncliffe. We also got questions about routings through the universities and the impacts on travel time. So all good questions. We also heard lots of questions and comments about design and construction. What's going to happen to my business when the street's under construction? What's going to happen to things like loading for the Budweiser Gardens and access to the market? Lots of questions about the tunnel. It's a big piece of infrastructure, so that it's appropriate that we're getting questions on that, and we'll address some of the responses to those questions in the latter parts of this presentation. And finally, concerns about property impacts as well. And I think just getting the plans out there and people seeing the plans is helping people to understand what rapid transit means. We had some questions about operations and technology, about electric buses. Some people aware of the potential for autonomous vehicles and how those will affect rapid transit. We have lots of answers on that. Don't negate the need for rapid transit by any means. Concerns about eliminating some transit routes, and you know, these are valid questions which will be which are addressed to some extent through LTC's 2016 study and will continue to be addressed. Lots of questions about concerns of on-street, loss of on-street parking and loading and congestion. So these are, you know, very typical questions that we hear in different cities when we're working on rapid transit projects and every major infrastructure project. We also heard comments about the market, and a lot of the comments post-meeting have talked about things like loading and how will access for the market take place, and things like, you know, how will parents drop their kids off at the Original Kids Theatre. So these are very, you know, valid questions, and all part of the process of developing and designing a rapid transit system. Just rounding out this portion of the presentation, other ideas. Again, this isn't the full list, but you know, a lot of people said positive things about the project. You know, I don't think anyone's really questioning the need for better transit and rapid transit in London. They see some significant benefits to the community and environment. There are still questions about the investment and why not just upgrading existing routes, and that's addressed to some extent in the business case, which looked at the impacts of the base case alternative and you know, producing lower benefits than the preferred alternative. And then there was questions and comments about the format of the public meeting and why not a presentation. So we've received all these, and we'll continue to tweak our approaches and try and answer all of the questions and comments that came out of the Public Information Center. So that's that part of the presentation. I'll now move on to the agenda item called Downtown Routings. Just before I start that, just recap for everyone's benefit, the Rapid Transit Network. This network has been in place for some time, consisting of a north and east route, I'll call that the orange line, and a south to west route. And I want to sort of introduce those terms once again, because when we get into the details of the downtown routings, I will be talking about the east to north route and the south to west route. But this, you know, this basic concept goes back to the Smart Moves Transportation Master Plan. It has certainly evolved since then, and we've looked at various questions like Western University, the Richmond Clarence Couplet, Old East Village, access across the Forks area to the west, all part of the process of the environmental assessment. So moving on to the downtown routing itself, this is what we're calling our preferred downtown routing, and as has been mentioned, this isn't yet council approved, but it has been in place in this form for some time. It consists of the east to north route along King Street, coming from the Old East Village and up Richmond Street, and the south to west routing up Wellington Street, across King Street, up Rideout, and across the Kensington Bridge or Riverside Drive to the west. And I think, you know, it's important to note that this route in a very similar form was presented as early as Public Information Center number 2, which was in May of 2015. So it has evolved, but you know, we have been gravitating towards this routing for some time. There have been some changes though, and I'll talk about those, and those that are in response to some of the concerns raised by businesses. So the process in the environmental assessment, it is iterative. We started out looking at kind of from the citywide perspective, and the fact that the downtown represents kind of the node where all of the rapid transit routes come together. Within the downtown itself, we did start from pretty much a blank slate. Despite a lot of the previous studies and histories, we didn't constrain ourselves to that, and we looked at any and all feasible options, and believe me, it was a lot of different combinations and permutations. We then overlaid the objectives and constraints of other planned projects, other city-approved projects, the Dundas Place, the Queens Avenue cycle track, which was being evaluated as in parallel to our study, the initiatives around the Back to the Forks, and the overall the London plan itself and its vision for making the downtown a vibrant pedestrian-oriented place. We then sort of broke things down a little bit in terms of the northeast and the southwest routing, and that's the way I'm going to break down this presentation a little bit to helps understanding. We looked at key generators and attractors of rapid transit. We applied all of the technical criteria from transit ridership to traffic access and impacts and parking. We did along the way, as always, consider public and stakeholder input and made some modifications as a result of that. Going back to some of the earlier public information centers and correspondence, people raised concerns about impacting both Richmond and Clarence Street, and why sort of impact two streets. They raised concerns about the location of the tunnel portal on Richmond Street and its impacts on access. And we've made some changes to the tunnel by extending the portal south so it doesn't impact the heart of Richmond Row. We also, I think, went further than typically done in a master plan in developing concept designs, because it does come down in many cases to feet and inches as to whether something will fit. Queens Avenue, for example, is very constrained in some locations, and that impacts our thinking on some of the alternatives. We thought about constructability and streetscape opportunities, and it was, as I mentioned, an iterative process to try and balance inputs and constraints. So some of the context and supporting information, which I thought would be important to show at this meeting, and again, some of this has been shown in public forum at the information centers. But the first one is existing ridership, and I think this is a powerful image. You could argue that these ridership, and this shows what we call boardings and lightings, or boardings and exits in the PM peak hour, so an indication of where people are getting on and off. You could argue that it's somewhat influenced by where the routes go, but it does tell us that the center of gravity for existing transit riders is around Richmond and Dundas. That's what kind of I think of as the center of gravity of downtown London. It also tells us that Richmond Street going north is a major generator and attractor of transit. And it tells us that despite the fact that there's transit on York Street, that it's not so much of a transit generator currently. We also look at things like we call daytime population. This should indicate daytime population at the top. This is essentially anyone working and living in the downtown. So it's in the daytime. So it's people working in offices. It's people attending the shops in the market. It's people living downtown and working from home. And it's a pretty massive number. It's 53,000 people in the entire downtown area is defined by this boundary. And what it tells us is, when we look at the breakdown of the stats, it tells us that Queens Avenue is really kind of the central main concentration of daytime population, and that's no surprise given that places like London Life offices are in that location. But it is sort of highlighting that is again the center of gravity of the downtown, and less daytime population on the fringes of downtown. So there's been some pressure to say, well, let's, maybe put rapid transit on the outskirts of the downtown, York Street or other streets. And I think it would be a disservice to the entire city to, sort of avoid the central mass of the downtown with rapid transit and make people walk further. We also looked at activity generators, and I won't go through these, you know them by heart, Budweiser Gardens, Covenant Market, the new and emerging Fanshawe College. And, we can't connect all of these with rapid transit, but in looking at the routings, we try and connect as many as possible and make sure that people are within walking distance from the stations to these major activity generators. We look at traffic, and we have detailed synchro models or simulation models, but this kind of summarizes it in, I think, a quick, easy to interpret public format. And the key message I want to draw out in this presentation is that York Street is a major mover of vehicular traffic in downtown London. It carries as many people, as many cars as King Street and Queens Avenue combined. So we want to, be cognizant of that and sort of protect the integrity of York Street. If we say put rapid transit on York Street and take away lanes, that traffic has to go elsewhere. York Street is also, next to Dundas, the only two-way street providing continuous connectivity through the downtown as well. We also think about local transit routings, and this becomes very complicated. So I'll let Kelly step in and explain some of the things that are happening.
And this slide ties directly back to Dundas Place, which we talked about earlier, and coincides with some of the things that Brian has touched on. In preparing to remove buses from Dundas, staff spoke to riders. We did extensive surveys, and we looked at the best routing to accommodate moving buses off of Dundas while mitigating the negative impacts to our transit riders. And what we heard loud and clear is, we need to stay close to that corridor. As you saw in those earlier maps, that's where people are getting on and off of transit. That's where they want to be. So the routing that will be in place, effective as early as this fall when we move buses off of Dundas, will be utilizing King and Queens. And what that's going to result in is approximately one eastbound bus every 1 to 2 minutes during peak hours along that corridor, because there's 11 routes that will be traveling along those corridors in the downtown core. The other piece that will be required is the removal of a number of parking spots along those corridors so that we've got bus stops, so a place for the buses to pull over for people to board and alight. So this will be one of the impacts, again, not directly tied to rapid transit, but this is an impact of the implementation of the Dundas Place project, but it further confirms that, the riders' desire based on a separate project, and what we confirmed is to stay as close to that Dundas corridor as possible, and as close to where riders do want to get on and off of transit.
Thanks. So I mentioned it was an iterative process, and we did sort of break it down into the north east routings, and I'll start out with that one. We did look at them combined as well, but for this presentation, I'll present them in this order, starting with the north and east because it is the highest ridership route. So we looked at, this is not all of the routes we looked at many more, but this is the ones that came out as potential shortlisted candidates and went through the more detailed evaluation process. So we looked at King Street, we looked at York Street, we looked at combinations of Richmond and Clarence, and as I mentioned earlier days, the idea of a couplet where rapid transit goes one way on Richmond and one way on Clarence. And the preferred route, as I've shown, is King Street and Clarence Street. One of the things that routing does is not only provides a very short direct route for rapid transit passengers, but it does provide a nice, neat connection to the routes to the east, to the Old East Village, and to the north on Richmond Street. So that concept, what we call the preferred routing, consists of rapid transit on Clarence Street. And right now that street has 2 lanes, one in each direction for cars, plus on-street parking. 2 of those lanes will be converted to transit only. It will require some removal of on-street parking, and will maintain between 1 and 2 lanes for general traffic, and it varies by block. And I think we've presented to this working group that concept in previous meetings, as well as at the public open house. So it is a major change for Clarence Street. King Street, again, 2 lanes will be converted to rapid transit only. That will involve the removal of on-street parking and on-street loading, necessitating the need for mitigation measures, the removal of the existing bike lane, and it will maintain 1 lane for eastbound general traffic, providing access to the market, the parking lots, and area businesses. So just in summary, some of the key considerations of this route is, as mentioned, it is the shortest route for the north to east movement. It serves a number of activity generators. It provides a very close connection to the Via Rail Station, less than 200 meters, short walking distance to that major hub. It will require the removal of some on-street parking. Driveway access will be maintained on King Street in particular. It's not going to be like the rest of the rapid transit corridors where there's a hard concrete barrier. Traffic will be able to cross the rapid transit lanes and access activities such as large parking lots in the market. And it does maintain the traffic capacity of Richmond Street and York Street, and I think that's a really important point. So moving on to the south and west alternatives. Again, this is the narrower list, and the key options we evaluated were the routing up Wellington Street and either along King Street or along Queens Avenue, or in a couplet form. And again, we've drawn up sketches of the concepts at the early stage to think about what this would look like and think about how the bridge crossings of the forks would work, and all of the considerations which fed into the evaluation. So the preferred concept would consist of 2 lanes converted to transit only on Wellington Street. Not all of Wellington Street. We can't address that portion under the CN rail tracks under that existing grade separation. But it would imply some changes to Wellington Street. King Street, as mentioned, would be converted to 2 lanes of transit only with the removal of parking. And Rideout Street would be reconfigured to accommodate a new northbound lane for rapid transit to connect up to the crossing across the Kensington Bridge. So this, some of the key considerations for this routing is it's, again, the shortest route with efficient travel times, serves a number of activity generators consistent with the other alternatives, connects the Via Rail Station. It does require the removal of parking, and it does accommodate cycle tracks on Queens Avenue and the Dundas Place Flex Street. I haven't placed a lot of emphasis on that, but that's a major change in the downtown, which these rapid transit alternatives accommodate and build on and feed. So in summary, for the downtown, King and Clarence, in our opinion and based on the technical analysis, and King and Wellington are the preferred routes for dedicated lanes. They provide efficient travel times, simple routing, good transit experience. That's what we want to achieve, is happy riders and happy future riders that convert from cars. It hits the center of gravity, accommodates Dundas Place, connects the Via Station, accommodates the cycle track on Queens, converts the Kensington Bridge to active transportation, and that's a key objective of the back to the river plan. And other alternatives like Queens Avenue wouldn't facilitate that transformation of that area. That said, are there going to be impacts? Yes. This is a major project. It's a major rapid transit project. And the next stage is to look at all of those impacts at a detailed level, from construction to deliveries. But we think these alternatives at least offer the best case to minimize the impacts. So with that, I'll turn over to Eric Cassell to talk about the North Corridor routings.
Thank you, Brian. So just as a reminder, the preferred North Corridor routing is the one we see here. So it starts just where Colborne Street meets Central and goes up Richmond Street. It continues along Richmond, passing St. Joseph's Hospital, before turning onto the campus of of Western University at University Drive. There'll be a station at that location that will also serve Kings. It will then go through the Western University campus, serving also the hospital, which is located there, before turning up Western Road, and then finally finishing off at the corner of Richmond and Fanshawe Park Road, which is at the Masonville Mall. So that is the preferred routing that we have currently. Very similar to what you heard Mr. Hollingworth talk about, what we did is we really kind of, identified and evaluated citywide routing alternatives that were out there. We looked really at the key generators for transit, not only people that are currently taking transit, but where could we have a potential to pick up new riders. We examined key technical criteria, including obviously existing transit ridership, traffic patterns, access, property impacts, and in fact, we did the 4 PICs, and in fact, during those 4 PICs, as I go through and talk about the options, in fact, we've refined and changed things based on the public input we've gotten. And then, of course, we've had a very, very extensive and ongoing involvement with Western University, where we've examined multiple options with them, and finally have come to an option that the university is comfortable with for rapid transit across the campus, which we're very pleased to have gotten to, and in fact, showing the amount of stakeholder consultation that we've been involved for these routes here. And then we've developed a number of these to conceptual design to make sure that they're technically feasible. And at the end of all of this, we evaluated them to come to the desired options. So very similar to the process Mr. Hollingworth has just shown you for the downtown corridor routings. So on a higher level, we kind of started off with 3 general routing alignments, one of which was to use the Western Warncliffe alignment to go all the way up from downtown, so across the Kensington Bridge, across Riverside, then up Warncliffe, which becomes Western Road, to reach the Masonville Mall. The other alternative, which had been in the Transportation Master Plan, was to go up Richmond Street the entire way, once again ending off at the Masonville Mall. And then there was the option to go through the university, which was the third option that was analyzed. So in analyzing the options, we really examined a number of items, such as current transit boardings and ridership. So once again, as Mr. Hollingworth explained, this is people who get on and off existing transit, and this is during the afternoon peak hour. So we can see that Richmond Row has quite a significant amount of ridership. We have a smaller amount of riders currently at St. Joseph's, but if you actually saw the slides that Mr. Fleming had presented earlier, actually St. Joseph's is a very significant generator of employment. So we think there's a real potential there with high quality rapid transit to actually increase the amount of people using rapid transit to that area. We come up, we can see actually right at the corner where we turn into the campus, a fairly large amount of ridership there. That's a lot of people going to Kings as well. So the idea of that, where we'd have a station at that location, would also be serving Kings. And then of course through the university campus itself. On top of the students, it's important to think that there's about 5,000 staff and faculty who work on the campus. Plus, of course, there is the hospital, which is located there as well, so some fairly significant generators. We can see along Western Warncliffe quite a number of boarding and alightings, and those are actually students that attend the university, most of those, that live in the large amounts of housing that's down there that are accessing the university. When we were looking at our alignments in terms of the ridership, both were fairly comparable, but we think there's a lot more potential on the Richmond route because we can take a lot more choice riders. While the riders which are along Western Road seeing their university students, they're short trips, and they're trips that can be accommodated by local LTC services. So those were some of the major factors that we'd been considering. So here's the land use information. In fact, Mr. Fleming's done a great job of this, so I won't spend too much time, but as you heard, this is obviously council endorsed and ministry endorsed by the province, that the Richmond corridor is obviously designated as a rapid transit corridor and, has potential in the plan to benefit from the inclusion of rapid transit. And then, of course, the major employment retail nodes, both downtown and up at Masonville Mall and its proximity. And of course, the large purple area, which is the institutional, which represents Western University and its adjoining functions. So the preferred corridor for us was 1C, which was the routing that took Richmond across the campus and then up Western Road. The big reasons is this provides access to Richmond Row, St. Joseph's Hospital, and King's University College. Obviously, good access to Western University going through the campus, allowing us a few stations through the campus. And of course, going through Alumni Circle, we actually come out on Western Road far enough to really serve the future expansion areas that the university is seeing. Because of floodplain issues and everything else, this will occur to the west of Western Road. Service to the University Hospital, and then, of course, the future transit village at Fanshawe Park Road, which is next to the Masonville Mall. It involves very significant engineering challenges if we tried to go across Oxford Street, namely the Thames Crossing, and then, of course, the adjacent CP rail bridge that would be there. The two are married quite closely together, and actually, we looked at a number of options, and they were also quite costly and difficult to traverse. It's also one of the best options we find for the overall existing transit ridership, but also we think there's some good growth potential there, bringing in a high service, premium service rapid transit. And it minimizes the environmental impacts. We looked at a lot of impacts, a lot of different alternatives for going between Richmond and Western Road. Many of those included new river crossings. The option that we have here actually uses all existing corridors and rights of way. And then, of course, it's consistent with the framework in the London Plan. Another key piece of this alignment is the tunnel, which goes beneath the CP rail. And, this has been something that a lot of people have been asking, why the tunnel? Why not other options? In fact, for us, the tunnel was kind of the last in a long list of alternatives that were examined. The first one, the most obvious one, I think anyone, when they look at a map of London and all the railways that surround it, is like, well, can't we just shift the railway away from this corridor and then we'll fix the problem and fix a whole bunch of other issues for the City of London? Of course, the more we started peeling back the layers of that onion, the more we were realizing the complexities and the huge costs that were involved with that. Namely, CP has shunting yards, has interconnections. To actually bypass, you'd need to negotiate with CN Rail. It would involve the neighboring municipalities, both levels of government, federal and provincial. And in fact, studies that have been done in the past indicated that, in fact, it would be more costly than the entire rapid transit initiative. So after having looked at that as probably the ideal scenario, it's definitely well outside the purview of the study that we were doing here. The next question, we said, well, can we lift or lower the tracks at Richmond Road, thereby allowing Richmond to pass unencumbered? The big issue we have there actually is two things, one of which the narrowness of the right-of-way, and then, of course, the adjacent river crossing. Because of the narrowness of the right-of-way, if we tried to elevate or lower the railway, we don't have enough room to do the construction work and maintain the existing line. So once again, if we had to close or relocate the line, well, you might as well just go through the whole process we talked for before. So unfortunately, because of the right-of-way, we didn't find any technically feasible engineering solutions to go up or down. And up would probably have to be the one because of the 2% grades railways can take. It wouldn't be able to get across the river in time. So, and the other concern, of course, is even if we're able to do all of this engineering-wise, with the proximity is to existing land uses, having these oil tanker freight trains crossing at 5 meters up in the air also presents its own issues. So finally, all of this, we said, okay, well, we can't do anything with the railway. So we started examining what could we do with the road on Richmond. One thing that's really important to keep in mind is just north of the railway on Richmond Street, the pavement that we have is 14 meters wide. Behind that, you have about 2.5 meter sidewalks and the building faces. So it is exceedingly narrow. So if we looked at any sort of option to either go above an underpass or an overpass that would take both the road and transit, we quickly realized we needed to bulldoze an entire side of Richmond Road. And this obviously would have very significant impacts and kind of destroy the very urban environment that rapid transit was seeking to improve. So after having seen that, in fact, any option that would allow us to carry both cars and rapid transit was infeasible, we then started looking at the alternatives for rapid transit, and this is how we finally landed up with the option for the tunnel. Before we got there, we did look at alternative options for the tunnel routing itself. All of them presented challenges, because except for the one in the extreme east there along Talbot, they all need to be grade separated. And the one at Talbot, the problem is the grade separation height isn't sufficient for buses. So all of them would require very significant changes in costs. And then, of course, with the very circuitous routings, they would be very impactful, very costly, and we wouldn't be achieving those key goals that we heard earlier of rapid transit, is we want a fast, efficient system. So with all of these reasons, this is why the existing alignment of the Richmond Street Tunnel was decided. So the preferred solution, after we had done all this, is really going underneath in a tunnel beneath the CP rails. The benefits to this on an average rapid transit trip is only 1 or 2 minutes. But you have to really picture the bigger issue. We've just done a recent study that shows that you can have 12 trains a day using this crossing. And they cross, a lot of them during daylight hours, and during when rapid transit would be heavily solicited. And these train crossings can last up to 12 minutes if the trains don't get stalled. On Sunday, I think you all know that there was a train that was stalled there for over an hour and a half. So even at 12 minutes, this is the very heavily traveled north and east corridor, we'd be running buses at 5-minute intervals. So meaning at 12 minutes, if they were waiting for a train, you'd have 3 rapid transit vehicles stacked up together, waiting on one side, 3 on the other. And of course, if you had a breakdown like 95 minutes, well, in fact, the whole fleet of rapid transit vehicles would be stuck there, so we'd have to short turn and people couldn't get across this barrier. So it would be completely against the fundamental principles that we're looking for rapid transit. And then also, we can't also underestimate the premium service this represents. We want to get people out of their cars. We want to show them a different alternative. And by giving them a premium service like this tunnel that they're getting able to ground this bottleneck, which goes through downtown, it really gives them a sense that they're getting an advantage over the car. And we feel it's going to be a key differentiator for people making the choice if they want to be using rapid transit. And then lastly, but not least, because of obviously the hospitals which are located to the north, it gives an added benefit that the tunnel is also able to be used by emergency services, police, fire, and ambulance to bypass traffic or incidents that occur there and allow them to still have the continuity between the north and south of London. So it actually also plays a public safety role as well as the benefits for public transit. So without the tunnel, the rapid transit would just not be as reliable and attractive a mode and would not meet the goals that we've set forth. So for us, we want to get people out of their cars into rapid transit, and we feel that this is a key part of the overall plan. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kelly.
Last slide and last speaker, I promise. I want to just talk a little bit about our next steps, particularly with respect to consultation. The consultation we've done thus far has been extensive, but the next phase in any project like this is to start really having those detailed discussions along corridors at a granular level so people can really understand what it means for them, and we can work through together our opportunities to mitigate impacts during construction as well as long-term when it comes to operations. And those conversations are really meant to happen through the TPAP process, which is our next phase. We are advancing some of that work in the downtown. We are going to continue with that work throughout the city as well. So it won't just be in the downtown, but we want to do that part right now. And that's part of an ongoing conversation. It won't be one set of meetings. It's an ongoing series of meetings and a relationship that we need to have as a project that takes a decade to deliver is going to impact our city in many ways. So the intent is to go through that process over the next several weeks, to address those impacts and develop some potential mitigation measures in April, and then to ultimately bring back our final recommended rapid transit master plan, seeking approval from council on the preferred routes. Right now, we're thinking that's April to May, early May ideally, but that will depend on how that process unfolds and the feedback we receive from committee and council as well. And then we'll proceed to the next phase of the project, which is the TPAP, the Transit Project Assessment Process, and that includes the development and evaluation of the detailed design solutions to help us mitigate negative impacts, and that ongoing conversation and consultation with the public, with agencies and stakeholders. And we're really eager to hear what our options are. I've been involved in a number of projects of this scale in other cities, and there are really great ways that we can work together through ambassador programs, through some of the things you saw on the Banff slides, that while there always are impacts to major projects like this, we can have conversations about how to make sure that we can work through this together successfully. With that, my team's available for questions.
Okay, I'll turn it over to committee for questions. Councillor Park?
Thank you, and that's a lot of information for everybody. That's good. I just do have a question. We heard that staff has heard the concerns of the public, and not yet have I heard how we're gonna work toward addressing them, apart from what Ms. Scher just said about those ongoing conversations. In terms of, if I was a business owner on any one of these transit corridors, not really having that granular information now, I would really want some comfort in knowing, in previous experiences, perhaps, how did we deal with that? Perhaps Ms. Scher can speak to her previous experience in terms of how do we make sure that clients can still get into your business despite the road being ripped up or those sorts of things. So, through the chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Every location will have some different solutions, but typically what I found works best is to actually have opportunities to say, we can solve problems quickly and in real time. What we want to do is make sure we have people like ambassadors out working with the business community who, if there's a need to clean a sidewalk that's gotten muddy because we've had construction traffic there, or move a no parking zone, or establish a temporary loading zone, there's somebody who's able to do those things during the construction process and do them quickly, so that it's not something that takes weeks to unfold, or you have to try to find your way through City Hall. Ensuring that we have great pedestrian access is incredibly important through construction, and providing parking alternatives and signing and having those ability for people to find access to businesses that may be a little bit different than they have been, during normal operations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I heard a lot about the transportation impacts, and I remember I spoke about this once before. My predecessor, Judy Bryant, would always talk about the triple bottom line, the economic, the fiscal, and the social, and how we have to have that lens. And today I heard a lot about the transportation lens and a little bit about the city building lens. And in my humble opinion, I would look at that couplet again, but look at with a mind to Queen going one way and King going the other. And I say that because if you go along Queen Street today, there's a lot of potential there for new development. Within the downtown, when you go westward from Adelaide Street into the downtown proper, you see a whole lot of parking lots, a whole lot of surface parking lots, and I think the community knows my stance on those. And having a really solid transportation network that's going along that corridor, I think there's a lot of potential there to incentivize development with a dedicated route there. And I'm glad that we saw the information from how much of a workplace population is along Queen Street every day. Those are the folks we want on rapid transit. Those are the folks that are clogging up every parking lot in town, and we need to make it as easy as humanly possible for them to want to get on a bus to get to work and hang around downtown and spend a few bucks at a shop or have dinner or whatever. I appreciate the comments about the anchors in the downtown. Those are always going to be huge draws for people to come into the downtown, and it would be my preference to drop them off a few blocks away from that anchor, because they're coming downtown to go to the Bud, they're coming downtown to go to Covent Garden Market or the library or what have you. But I want to see them on the street a little bit longer so they have more of a reason to linger and experience the downtown and all the fine things that our retailers have to offer here. So moving forward, I think that we as a council and the commission need to take all these into consideration, the social impacts. I haven't heard enough about what are we going to do to address those. And going forward, I'm glad to hear that we have a good communication plan coming forward. I think we all had some work to do previously on that, and we could look back all day, but we're going to move forward from here. So I still have concerns about the L and the 7 and where they're actually meeting in the downtown, because to represent my constituents, well, I need to bring those concerns to the table, and that's what I'm here to do today. So I really want more choice for council and the commission here to have today or in the future.
So I guess pick up from where my colleague came. I guess one of the things I'd like to see is a business impact analysis. And one of the problems we've had, I think certainly with the PIC last week, is it was the whole system. And the folks, for example, residential folks up on the northern part of Richmond Street will have certain issues that they want to talk about. Businesses on Richmond Street North, if I could use that, sort of in the tunnel area from, let's say from Dufferin North, will have unique perspectives, and King Street will have a unique perspective, and then the Old East Village will have a unique perspective. But we keep talking about it as an entire system, And somehow, Mr. Chair, I think we have to break it apart. And so I'm going to go back to my metaphor of the Gordian knot again. The only way, and I'm not very good at untying knots actually in real life. I can't see puzzles very well. But you have to loosen it somehow. Because if it's so tight, there's no way of untying the knot. And presentation's great, I get that. But we've tied the knot so tight because we've got Dundas Place and we've got a cycle track on Queens and we've got routes that are sort of preferred on King. So the question I have, Mr. Chair, is how do we loosen the knot so that we can start to see how, first of all, what the impacts are going to be in real time. And then secondly, how are we going to mitigate them? And I'm not talking with the greatest respect about dirt on the sidewalk. I have a machine that deals with that. I'm talking about a small business owner who has spent 15 years building a clientele that now isn't so motivated to come to their store. That's the kind of impacts that I'm concerned of. We actually do a pretty good job when we're under construction. That's the easy part. But we have to take this situation, somehow loosen some parts so we can actually problem solve in those localized situations. And it may be, and I Mr. Chair, certainly before council comes forward, I think it's really tough for us to make a decision on the whole thing. I would like to see a second alternative. I did read the detailed reports and a little bit, halfway through, my eyes did a little bit glaze over because there's so many, it's like doing one of those big jigsaw puzzles. So, Mr. Chair, that's my question. And I look to staff to say, how can we loosen it up so we can work together and work with the community to find solutions rather than just confirming what is here?
Someone like to address that?
Through the chair, I'll certainly start, and if anybody from the team wants to add on, that would be perfectly appreciated. I absolutely hear what you're saying, and it's the idea of doing a business assessment and saying for each business, here's what the impact could be or would be, unfortunately is an incredibly onerous activity to undertake, and they're not done for these projects because finding good data is very difficult. So typically the approach for a project like this would be to say, these are the routes that we intend to recommend, and now we're going to work with businesses to really understand and talk about mitigation measures, construction and long-term, to make sure that their client base continues to come to their business during the construction period and afterwards as well. And that needs to come back to council with the final recommendation on the routes so that you know where we're able to provide mitigation and what that looks like. And in cases where we're not able to mitigate to the degree of success that that business owner would want, that you have that information when you're considering the final approval.
Okay, so let me bust it down a little bit further. Let's take the Covenant Garden Market as an example, which we collectively own. So the preferred route, the preferred has a significant impact on operations for the Covenant Garden Market. On top of that, the other side of the coin is it has a significant potential benefit for the Covenant Garden Market, and we need to position that as well. And I'm not being totally negative. So what I would want to be seeing, because as a member of council, we own the Covenant Garden Market, I want to see. And the Covenant Garden Market has been very well run every year. They're increasing their sales and gross sales, which is what we want to see. I want to see, okay, what's the impact going to be for them and what's the mitigation? So what's going to be the impact of losing the street parking along King Street for Covenant Garden Market, but also for the businesses along there? How can we mitigate it? Should we be buying and there has been absolutely no mention in here of our downtown parking strategy. There was maybe one mention, I think it was, but how does that fit together? Should we be managing some of those lots more? Should we be purchasing some of them? So I need those kinds of mitigating strategies before I can approve or disapprove a particular route. I'm using that as an example. And I could go on with, from the tunnel north. What's the opportunity? I know you want to use it only for buses and emergency transit, but I know in some municipalities, vehicles that have 4 passengers in it are also allowed in the bus lane. Okay, so I want those kinds of options that we can think about, turn our minds to, not with a yes rapid transit, no rapid transit mindset, but how do we get so that the businesses are successful, the RT is successful, and the assumption that we're making, the big assumption in every presentation is that people will, because this is here, actually park their car. That's the assumption, that's the hope that we're presenting to the City of London. I love the $260 million of roads not expanded number. That's a big number. But that's the kind of analysis that we really need to have, Mr. Chair, so that we can think collectively and problem solve collectively.
Remember what I said about not clapping and booing? We have to stick to that. So please, from now on, if you could, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I got to remind the committee and staff that, again, we're going to go back to where we started this evening, that this is a working group. And I have no qualms about coming with alternatives for us to select it, because with all due respect to staff, what you're talking about there is when we present it to the standing committee, we want something relatively final to the standing committee. But coming to this committee, I don't think it has to be final. I want to be able to discuss it the same way Councillor Hubert talked about it. And I've always said that right from the beginning. You're not giving us any room to discuss it, to propose an alternative, or to ask questions, why this way and why not that way. That's what this committee is supposed to be able to do at one level or another, not on an individual basis, because I don't want to hear that somebody went into your office and talked to you and do some maneuvering, and then you come back and say, but Councillor such and such said that this is preferable. It's not Councillor such and such. It's the working group that I want to hear about. Over the past couple of weeks, let me give you an example. Some years ago, I remember one big star came here, and they were performing at the Budweiser Garden. And I remember that they brought about 9 trailers, and these are long trailers. And they had to park at the back. I call it the back, but it's really a long ride out. Yeah, ride out. And I remember that in order to get in there, they had to maneuver themselves, and they had to cross right out and block the street in order to back up and get back in to the Budweiser space. And that thing has always been in my mind. And I think that when I hear about the fact that we are going to interfere with the stars coming to Budweiser Garden, I'm just using my own words now, I think that that's the kind of thing that that conjure up in my head. And I wonder, gee, you know, if I see that rapid transit route going along there, and all of a sudden a star comes, some big time star, like Usher, for example. I just had to use my cousin's name, you know. And he comes with all these tractors. You're going to have to, these trailers, you're going to have to back up and stop rapid transit? Or how are they going to get in? I have no idea. Anyway, that's what comes into my mind when I listen to people saying that they don't have any space. So I'm very concerned about that, and I think that we need to look at that. I think that the TPAP, is that what you call it? Through you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a good idea. I think that that's exactly what we need. But I think that when we do it, we need to show that we are listening, and we need to show that we are hearing, and we need to show that we could respond. I'm not saying that we must go by everything that everybody says. I think that we made a very good presentation here this evening, but there are people with concern that I am not sure that we've taken those concerns into consideration as yet. And there are lots of them out there. I'm not going to go through all of them. I didn't hear some of them here, by the way, because people talk to me about a whole lot of different areas, such as the Via Rail and the Convention Center and the market and all these places, how are we going to handle the traffic in and out? And I think that Councillor Hubert identified some of them, but I think that that's the kind of study that we're looking for. I think that there are other things that we need to address. Some people say to me, why do we have to go through Western University? And you just showed a map just now that shows heavy traffic between Oxford and the University Gate on Western Road. I'm not so sure that we can't bring rapid transit up there and remove the rapid transit through the university. That's something that I'm just throwing out because it was pointed out to me. And one other thing I just want to quickly mention, and I stop, Mr. Chair, but it's to do with the tunnel. A lot of people who are concerned about the tunnel, they think that the tunnel is going to start at Williams and it's going to, we're going to pump buses through there and they're going to pump out close to Grovetown. They want, and I say to them, well, I assume that they'll be in and out. You'll be able to enter and egress along the way. So certainly you're going to have stairs going down to the tunnel where you're going to have access. I can't believe that the bus is going to fly that long distance without being able to pick up passengers in one or two places. So I'm just throwing that out, Mr. Chair. These are things that I think that we need to be able to address and hear people as we go along. And I know that we have these dates set. Personally, I'm not convinced that those dates are embedded in concrete. I think that once the federal government decides that the federal and provincial government decides that they're going to make a contribution, they're going to make that contribution regardless. And it's that plan that we have that will stand to it. So I just concern that we need to be able to respond to these things.
Thank you. Could you just respond maybe to the issue about the egress from the tunnel as it goes along for whether it's passengers or anything else? I think that might be helpful.
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. The tunnel that runs along under Richmond Street actually has a station at Oxford, an underground station. So there's a station at Williams, there's one at Grosvenor, but in the middle there is one at Oxford, so people can enter into the transit system at that location. That's correct, because you have to remember the tunnel is going down. It's on an angle. So you can only have the station at Oxford Street.
Mr. Shepherd.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, hear it from staff. If we get to the point where political decisions are changing the routes that have been worked on and evaluated and submitted so far, does that necessitate a change in the business case and a resubmission to the province, and what kind of a timeline impact or a funding impact might that have?
Changing the routes potentially changes the costs. It also changes the benefits in terms of transit ridership. So those are two of the main primary considerations in a business case. If we are to be changing those routes, we'll have to go back, reevaluate the entire business case. If it's a substantial change, it will require another technical review by the ministry. At this point, we've submitted the business case to the ministry back in May 2016. As of the last month, they really have no, the questions related to the business case have been primarily answered from them. So any change to the business case really will require resubmission to them for review again.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to hear more clearly what kind of timeline that's taken so far, so that we might expect to repeat, and please some clarification on I know there was an extensive cost benefit analysis presented when the RT options were first on table, whether it was from full LRT down to just enhanced bus, and there was cost benefit analysis done for each of those options. And I'd like to hear clarification, please, whether or not the maximization of benefits and the balancing of costs was actually part of the selecting of this option and these routes.
a lot of questions in there, so I'm going to try to work my way through there. In terms of the timeframe, we submitted the business case to the province back in May, and it wasn't until December that we finalized the technical review with them. So it was a substantial timeframe, and there was a number of back and forth iterations. In terms of the business case analysis, it does take into account, like I said earlier, the transit ridership, the costs. It is based on the recommended network that you have before you here today. So to make changes, we'll have to go back and undertake a new analysis.
Thank you very much, Chair. I heard a funny phrase yesterday that I think I want to repeat because we're not going to do this. The phrase said, "When all is said and done, sometimes more is said than done." And I want to be really clear that this is the Rapid Transit Implementation Working Group, and we're moving forward with rapid transit. A brief history in time: the London Convention Center, 1993. It's a white elephant. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be good for London. The JLC in 2002, it's in the wrong place. There are going to be parking issues. It won't work. No one will go. The Covent Garden Market in 1998, it's a waste of money. It's not where we should be directing our resources. We should be spending our money elsewhere. Go way further back in time. We always hear about the Ring Road. Council had an opportunity to pursue that at one point in time and chose not to. And I think that the community has regretted that ever since. And this is not going to be the 21st century version of that mistake. All of that said, I think we need to be really clear. There have been communication issues with this file. It's huge. This is the largest infrastructure program we've ever contemplated. And we need to address those. Because when there are communication issues, there are misunderstandings. A vacuum of information, it gets filled, but it gets filled with rumor and innuendo and misunderstanding. And I heard all kinds of inaccurate information at the most recent pick. I heard that King Street was going to be dug up to 60 feet deep and closed for 3 years. I heard that light rail was coming to London. I heard a number of other pieces of misinformation, or alternative truths, I guess you could say, alternative facts. So we need to do a better job of talking about, and we've started that today with this presentation and this review. But we also need to be, I think, open to understanding what alternatives might look like, as Deputy Mayor Hubert has spoken about. We need to be open to tweaks and to changes at this point because we haven't made that final decision. Most importantly, we need to understand what the strategies are to mitigate some of the issues that will arise through construction. For example, will Richmond Street be dug up for 3 years? I don't think so, but a lot of people think that. How do we communicate that information? Will the Bud Gardens not be able to have concerts anymore because the street that is most closely located to their loading dock won't have access? I don't think so. There are strategies that can be put in place to mitigate those issues, but that's not out in the public, and that's our challenge as we move forward. So, I think that we need to stay focused. We need to focus on follow-through, but there is room for more consultation at this point in time. And we need to keep an open mind to tweaks. We need to keep an open mind to changes that can mitigate some of those issues. But we also need to have a better understanding of the strategies that you're proposing to mitigate the issues that arise as well. And I think I'll leave my comments at that, other than to say that this conversation, I think, is very helpful for the community. It's a difficult one, and we need to find a way to keep that going.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to thank staff for this report. It's very in-depth and it's easy to read. It's not very technical. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank the members of the Downtown Business for sending in your concern. I do have it. I have read it. I've been to almost every one of these businesses on this list, and I want you to know that your concerns are heard by me. In addressing something that Councillor Park said about splitting the lines on King and Queen, from a transit perspective, from my own perspective as a transit user, the further I have to walk, the less I am inclined to do it. So rapid transit is just that. We're going to try and connect as many people as we possibly can, but if I have to get off at Queen and walk all the way down to King, I'm not going to be really thrilled about it when it's -20 and the sidewalks are slippery and there's going to be different barriers in my way. I have no accessibility issues, so other people do, and we have to keep that into consideration. Customer first. That's from my perspective as an LTC chair. And in regards to Bud Gardens and Covent Garden Market, I think it's really important that we keep those lines of communication open. The beauty of having a bus system is we can relocate. We can move on a dime. Well, maybe not a dime, but maybe a dollar bill. Detours are pretty commonplace for us. We know how to move quickly. We know how to get around the city where we have to. So taking that into consideration, yes, we need to further this communication. But I also want to say that I've been up in this gallery and I've listened to council and I've listened to staff and sat there with my hands clenched and my teeth clenched, wanting to say so many things. So for myself, I want to hear from the people that this is affecting. I would like to move a motion to have a public participation meeting in the next 3 weeks or so.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's important that we get to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely.
And I think we're moving in the right direction. I think staff's plans to come and do the project assessment process is really important. But at the end of the day, this is about all of London, not just one section of it. We want people to linger downtown, but we want people to linger in White Oaks and Masonville and Old East Village and all of the places in between. So the more that I hear from you, the more I can learn what your concerns are. I've received many, many emails, and I appreciate those, many Twitter comments, and those are great, but let's have a public record so that everyone around this horseshoe can understand where you're coming from. Thank you.
Are we, as a working group, are able to have a public participation meeting?
No, but I think we can request out of the committee that this will ultimately go to, which is a CWC community. Yeah, I think if it's framed that way, we can do that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we speaking to the motion or the request?
What we would do right now is people had already got on the speakers list before there were any motions, and you are on that. I'm going to speak, and if anyone else wants to make comments, and then we'll deal with the motions.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you to staff for your presentation too. One of the reasons I sit here on this working group is to get the information, and so I can communicate that. Being the councillor of Ward 9, which is out in Byron, Lambeth, it is important to residents there about rapid transit, believe it or not. They are interested in knowing what's going on, and as the councillor, I'm interested in passing that information, and it is important that I get it right. It is our biggest infrastructure project, and I take it very seriously. So that's why I'm here, and to my committee members, when you see me, I want you to see all of London is concerned about how we do this. Rapid transit is very, very important to all of London. And in Mr. Fleming's presentation, the London plan speaks to me about how we are going to build our city in and up. And that is just a great reminder to all of us how we do this. I have 3 quick questions, and following up on Mr. Shepherd's questions about alternatives, and I'm trying to understand what we are as a working group and how we work and what we can and can't do. So I guess my question to staff would be I would hope any alternatives that are available to us without getting into the business plans or to sort of look at and tweak, I would assume would be brought to this working group, if I can just have clarification on that.
Through the chair, In terms of bringing back new alternative routes, may I ask for some clarification? Are you looking for us to bring back new route alternatives or alternatives, strategies for mitigation, as a number of people at the table have already mentioned?
Yes, more the mitigation. I understand if we look at different routes, we're looking at a business plan, and then we have that long process of waiting again for funding. But what is available to us as a working group to discuss and to have discussions about change?
Through the chair, the intent would be to go out and meet with businesses in small groups or individually and talk about their particular concerns and generate strategies that can work both during construction and in the long term to mitigate some of those impacts. That information would come back through staff to this table for discussion and for advice and guidance as the working group is meant to provide us.
Good. I hope that will happen. And I know it was, the parking strategy was mentioned as well, and that sort of piqued my interest because obviously we do have a parking strategy out there, but also as we go through the this process, will there be a parking strategy as well?
Through the chair, the parking strategy, which I know council has been long awaiting, we are revising the financial assessment. There's some minor changes we wanted to make as staff, and we're basically at final draft. So we expect to see that coming very shortly, and we can look to bring that information, I would think, this spring as well.
Thank you. So as we implement this infrastructure program, will that be considered in the strategy?
Through the chair, certainly the parking strategy, the downtown parking strategy is part and parcel to all these moving pieces in the downtown, Dundas Place, back to the river, and obviously rapid transit. So we certainly need to give that information to council, and we can bring it here as well, so that that's part of your decision-making and advice-giving process. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last question, if I may, the feeder routes. So I didn't see too many comments from the public about the feeder routes, and maybe it's a little premature, I'm not sure, but maybe that is a question. When are these feeder routes going to be considered? Obviously, we've got to get the spine in and get that figured out, but I noticed in the presentation that the southwest routes have low ridership. So when I see that, I think, okay, we need ridership, and I know my conversations with the community are always about once we have it in place, how will you use it? So I think, not sure what comes first, but if I can have a little bit more feedback about if there was any comments about feeder routes and in particular ridership concerns in the south and west.
Through the chair to the councillor, I can comment on the feeder routes. The post-2019 framework that the Transit Commission has approved is envisioning bringing the frequencies and the restructuring associated with the rapid transit corridors online to coincide with the launch of the rapid transit corridor. So as a corridor comes online, the routes feeding that corridor will be realigned, frequencies changed accordingly. So it will all happen together. It won't be a matter of one's in place and then the other one will follow. It's all intended to coordinate together.
And would you go out and get public input for that, or would you look at the numbers? Would they sort of determine what you will do there? Because in Ward 9, especially young people, they want a bus. They don't want to walk a kilometer to the bus stop. And so it's sort of, well, we don't have it, so how are we going to get it in place?
Through the chair to the councillor again, yes, so when I talked about the post-2019 framework, it is just that, a framework, but it envisions each year the types of service changes that we would be looking to make to align with the launch of the rapid transit corridors, but all of those things are subject to the Transit Commission's annual service planning process, which, as you're aware, includes extensive consultation with the public, but also, estimates of ridership and that kind of analysis that's done at the time, because doing it now, it could change drastically by the time we're actually looking to implement, but that's all part of that annual service planning process.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments and questions from my colleagues on the working group. As you can see, we have a lot of great people in Ward 4, including the chair of the London Transit Commission. I thought she had very good points there. I wanted to ask a couple questions around timing, because I think we're starting to get closer and closer to some of the details and getting towards actual implementation. Obviously, once we get funding from the province and the federal government to pay for it, the big portion that is going to be funded by them. I wonder if we could just talk about the construction phasing and what we're thinking about right now, when we think things are going to be happening. A lot of concerns I've certainly heard from business owners, both in my area and also in other parts of the corridors, really around the construction impacts and how long they're going to be. And I know we don't have all this information now, but covering off some of the basics I think would be helpful. In particular, as it pertains to the tunnel and the construction of that and the underground station and so forth. So.
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. So I'll attempt to provide some overview here. The timing and the phasing really is linked back to when we get the funding. Right now, our anticipated timeline, if we were to be going along what we are looking at here, would be wrap up the TPAP process sometime early next year, January, February. It's not a short process. In terms of construction, it does take some time. There is utility relocations that need to be done. There's issues related to property that'll have to be dealt with. Getting a contractor, deciding on what is the project delivery model for the various segments. And it could be a different project delivery model for the different legs of the system itself. We did have a very preliminary phasing and timing inside the business plan, but that has changed since we've submitted that business case to council back in May, given the time frame that has passed. So at this point, I can't really give you a firm detail. We need to work through the TPAP process, and we need to look at when we get actual funding to determine which leg would go first in terms of construction itself. But in terms of the tunnel itself, because there has been quite a bit of questions about that, it's not 3 years. It will depend on construction delivery model that we're actually utilizing, but we do anticipate that the closures would be of a smaller time frame through that section, and it might take a year or two to build the tunnel, but it would be done in pieces.
Thank you. As somebody who for quite a few years was going back and forth between Toronto and London, I tell you, when they ripped up all in front of Union Station and had it covered over, that was a very long project, but people were using that street for most of that time back and forth, and they were doing all kinds of work underground, but the actual impacts on the street were not as severe. And now that it's finished, I gotta tell you, that was a great project. One other question I have around the timing is around the parking strategy, and this is something that's been in the queue for a while, and if we could just get some more specifics around when exactly we think that's gonna be coming forward, because I think considering all the impacts, which we of course approved this as part of our strategic directions for trying to coordinate all these infrastructure projects downtown, was this principle that we're gonna be talking about taking away some on-street parking. I think there's a lot of interest in what other plans there might be for parking.
Thank you through the chair. The intent is to bring the parking strategy back to Civic Works in either April or May, so it is very, very close.
Okay, so a few comments. So we can see the difficulty in trying to put back in a great transit system into what was originally designed for a great transit system. We had streetcars running in London from 1875 to 1940. All of downtown and all these old neighborhoods that were built at that time were designed around the idea of having people walking, taking bikes, taking streetcars, and cars were not such a big deal then. It's only since the cars really taken off as this convenient way of getting around town that we've done things like build suburban malls and send people in their cars to go park at giant surface parking lots. And now we're now trying to put it back into what should have never been taken away from the downtown in the first place, which is a great transit system that would have moved people around the city in an affordable and convenient way. It's very difficult to take it away and then 75 years be coming back and trying to put it back in. We should never have done that, and I feel some responsibility for that, although I wasn't on council in 1940. with all these things, there are trade-offs, and I think our staff and our consulting team have done a good job of trying to describe the trade-offs, because it's not as though it's always unicorns and rainbows and sunshine on everything when it comes to a big project like this. And understanding the specifics of what it will mean is really important, and I understand where some of the fear and the uncertainty and the doubt comes from around a big project like this, because it's not like nudge London, right? It's like shift London. We're talking about a lot of change, and we're talking about a big project. So I understand where it's coming from. For me, we have to take some responsibility, I think, as counselors, certainly. We're making a lot of decisions along the way, and we're starting to put constraints on the project. So when we do things like, we're gonna do Dundas Place, okay, well, that changes what's possible in terms of the transit project. When we say we want to have a cycle track on Queens, we've made all these decisions along the way, right? And in some cases, what the decision we made is we want to start the process to look at that as an option. In other cases, we've started that process, has come back, we've said, yep, that looks good, let's do it. We've done decisions through the budget to give projects funding, and then our staff and the consulting team have to work with all these constraints that we put on. Some of them come from the physical world, right? The road is only so wide, there are houses here, there are heritage buildings there. Other ones come from the decisions that we make along the way. And we have made a lot of decisions on this already. So when we decided to do the full BRT with the tunnel, that was a major decision. You know, that's saying this is gonna be a much more expensive project, but it's gonna have much greater benefits overall. We could have gone for the base BRT. And if I recall correctly, in May 2016, that wasn't even voted on as an option. Like, nobody even wanted to put it forward as an option. We did vote on it before that, when we looked at the base BRT with no tunnel. It's a much worse project in my mind. It is really just this like incremental teeny upgrade to the existing transit system, and it's not gonna really solve the major problem, which is reliability and travel times to give people a more convenient alternative to the car in terms of getting around the city. So the tunnel for me is a non-starter in terms of like, let's go revisit that, and should there be a tunnel under that grade train crossing on Richmond. We've been slowly fixing these grade separations for all kinds of different modes of travel. We're talking about doing one at Adelaide. We dealt with one over on Hale with the roundabout. We've got them all throughout the city, and that's just a function of the way the city is built out with the railways and the rivers the way they are. We need a lot of grade separations and ways to get across these physical barriers. I don't see how the system would make sense without the tunnel. And I think once it's done, Richmond is gonna be such a great street with, you know, the buses will be all underneath, they'll pop up at the convenient spots, people will be able to walk up and down that street to shop at all these different stores. I think it would be amazing. So I think the tunnel is great, and frankly, I'd like to see more of a tunnel. I wish I had a tunnel over at Old East Village. Getting it underneath the street is great, and where it makes sense to do that, I think we really need to. The other routing options, and this is something we had to wrestle with in Ward 4 when we're talking about how do we go through Old East Village, because for a long time, the recommendation was to have part of it on Dundas and part of it on King, similar to how we had the original recommendation to have part on Richmond and part of it on Clarence. And as we got more into the details of the constraints, and I have to say the staff and the consulting team did an amazing job coming out and talking directly to business owners, getting feedback about access and loading requirements. We had a meeting out there where I think we had 12 city staff talking about various projects, not just rapid transit, but the parking upgrades that are happening in that area. And a number of other files, the grade separation, the road construction further down east at Dundas and Quebec, to talk about how they all work together, because it's not like you can just talk about one in isolation. And similarly, when we were talking about this segment, should it be on King and should it be on Dundas, we talked about what would that mean for downtown, because, well, we might want something in this part of the city, but it might not work at all for the folks in downtown. So when we thought about, well, maybe you should keep part of it on Dundas, and we're gonna make it turn. And so you add the turn in it. And is that really what's best for the system overall? And we had to wrestle with that, because there might be some very specific reasons why you might want it to be on Dundas. Maybe you can have it just run on King, and that's better overall, and people can live with that kind of compromise. And that's what the kind of discussions we have to have here will be. It's about the trade-offs, and it's about what's gonna work best for the city in the long run, right? Not in like the short term, a couple of years, not even in the medium term, 15 years. We're talking like, what is it gonna be in like 50 years, right? What's gonna be really good in 50 years? I think we need to give some kind of guidance to our staff if we're looking at alternatives. They're all listed out here as options. They've gone through and looked at all the ones that are like technically feasible. They all have their own pros and cons. when I heard Councillor Park talk about having it come on Queens, I said, well, that sounds great until you get to Adelaide and then you're into a residential neighborhood. So I can tell you, we're not sending bus rapid transit down Queen Street through a residential neighborhood. That's not gonna make sense. It's not gonna work. So I'm not sure how we can accommodate that. Maybe there is something that would work. Where we have it partly on Queens and then it turns onto a different routing. But I'd like to get the specifics because I think just saying come back with, your next best option is not great. I think the ideas about having it down on York are similarly very close to being a total non-starter. It's so far south. There's very limited ability to do intensification between the railway and York Street. I just don't think that that's going to work from a city building perspective, let alone a transit perspective. It's not close to where people are trying to go. And so I hear what Chair Ruth was saying around, you got to make the transit stations actually convenient for transit users if they're going to use them. So those are my concerns. I'm interested to see what my colleagues have to say about the specifics of alternatives throughout the downtown and perhaps other places. We certainly haven't talked about Wellington Street or any of the other parts of the corridor, but I'm glad we're having the discussion. I think the presentation was really helpful in going through all the different pieces and what we have to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, we got a question about the next phase that you've referred to. I think that was one area that wasn't maybe crystal clear in the slides today, and we heard it a couple of times. It's TPAP, and even I need a good reminder of exactly what that's going to be. So for my benefit and for the benefit of everyone who's come in the gallery tonight, can you tell us what the next planned phase is? I think I understand it was going to be for about a year, but tell us what it's going to be.
Through the chair, I'm going to ask Mr. Hollingworth to speak a bit about the technical process, and we may add a few things around the consultation as well.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I think we presented at the last Rapid Transit Implementation Working Group an overarching schedule. And where we're at now is what's called the Rapid Transit Master Plan. And we need to get that finalized. It's phase 1 and phase 2 of the environmental assessment. We then, it really confirms the problems, the alternatives that we looked at, and the overarching solution and the routes. And then what the transit project assessment process, TPAP, does is it's very similar to what we would call a Schedule C environmental assessment, which addresses phase 3 of the EA process, which looks at design alternatives. And that's where we get into how many frogs are impacted. What is the archaeological impacts? What are all the solutions around providing access to various major uses and loading, so looking at those detailed alternatives. But we need to get the master plan approved. That was scheduled, I think, to go about now. It's been delayed a little bit, so once that is approved, then we can move into the TPAP phase, and that's a legislated timeframe. So there's about 120-day period from the start of when you say, yes, we're kicking on the TPAP clock to when the province actually gives a blessing for the approval of that environmental assessment process.
As an environmentalist, I care a lot about frogs, so thanks. But I think others in the room would like to hear examples, if they're appropriate, and I think I've understood correctly, that the level of detail then you're looking at is the kind of access and ingress and egress and sidewalks and all of the things that I think the people in the gallery and people watching are very interested in. And is that level of detailed discussion and consultation what's coming up in the next process?
Through the chair, the short answer is yes, although we've decided to advance some of the early parts of that discussion to now, so there can be more information provided through the approval of the master plan as well.
Please don't worry, I'll keep the heat down. I can tell you that one of the joys of being the chair of this committee and the Ward 6 councillor is that you get a lot of email and you get a lot of phone calls about rapid transit. And in the last week and a half or so, it's been all I can do to keep up with those number of emails. And often my response is, you know, you really need to talk to other councillors about this issue other than me. Because emailing me and saying, Phil, do this, Phil, do that, do this right away, it just, that's not how a city council works. So there's a, you know, I've certainly had to pay a price for that. I went to my doctor yesterday, my wife made me go. He took my blood pressure and he put me on medication for my blood pressure right away. So I'm not asking for any breaks here. I'm just saying that I think councillors do their best. We try to deal with all the issues that come before us, and there's a price to be paid for that. So I appreciate that there's been understanding today, because my health is more important than this job. And so if I can't continue to this job because my health is affected, I'll be out of here with my family. That being said, I've read all the information, I've read all the reports, and, you know, one of the things that I've always raised, and I want people to understand this, I've never said I didn't want better transit. I've never said I didn't want a rapid transit system that worked for London. That being said, I've been pilloried by a lot of people in the last few days saying I'm timid, I don't look towards the future, I'm cheap. I get that a lot. So, you know, that's fine. I understand that. I'm cheap at home also. So I just wanted to say this, that for me, I've spent a lot of time, and I hope the engineers and everyone appreciates this. I spent a lot of time looking at the north, the route, the preferred north corridor. And you have not convinced me as of yet that you have made the right choice on that corridor. And I'm going to tell you why, from a layperson's point of view, and why I would like to see Route 1B, to be specific, still discussed with the public, at least discussed with the public. Now, I understand I've got an uphill battle in convincing anybody not to dig the tunnel and be on Richmond Row. I get all of that. And if that's the decision, I'll live with it and move on. But first of all, the route on 1B really, to me, matches up with a lot of the infrastructure changes we're already doing in London. We're already widening the tunnel on Western Road. We're already widening Western Road. And we wouldn't need a tunnel. We wouldn't need to dig a tunnel. $100 million in this budget would not be there. And I would have thought that would be a good thing for a business case, but perhaps I'm being a little cheap again. There would be no disruption of Richmond Street. I can tell you that in my ward, which is north of Oxford, probably in excess of 95% of the people, not all of them, do not want rapid transit on Richmond Street. They think it's too tight. They don't think it's the appropriate route. Similarly, I've heard loud and clear from the merchants on Richmond Street that they're doing well, but they're just hanging on. They don't want rapid transit. The stops don't stop in front of their stores. It would be just going through. And there would be no requirement to be hopefully looking ahead to making this deal with Western. So I really strongly disagree when it's been said over and over again, we've got an agreement with Western. We've got an agreement with Western. No, we don't. We can go through campus, but it's going to cost us a lot of money and a lot of effort. And I believe Western would be very happy to have a transit stop on Western Road in front of the UCC so their students could bus on their internal busing system, which is very sophisticated, and get to that station and travel downtown. Now, I don't know if that'll ever get support, but on behalf of my constituents, the people that I represent, I at least would like that on the table. I would at least like them to have the opportunity to speak to you about that in a public participation meeting. And I hope that's not too much to ask. I hope that's not too much to ask. I can't make motions here, but all I'm asking today is for one of my colleagues to make a motion that included in what you bring forward will also be Route 1B. You can recommend against it. You can say as staff you don't like it, but Councillor Squire at least would like it on the table. Anybody further before we go to motions? Okay, Councillor, Deputy Mayor.
Well, I know there's been a suggestion for a PPM, but I think what might be, and I support that, but I'm wondering if there's kind of an order to it, because sometimes we just have a PPM sort of in a vacuum, and we would hear probably much of what we've already heard at the PIC. So, Mr. Chair, if I could, and maybe we can work collaboratively on this throughout that, and I think I'll try and incorporate your last suggestion if I could, that we ask staff to bring forward to two alternatives. There's too many combinations and permutations in the report. So the good counselor and chair has asked for an alternative scenario coming north-south, and then a second alternative for the east-west. So what would north-south A, which I would assume would be the staff recommendation, and north-south B as an alternative, and then we would have a east-west, I'm just using that just so I know which way we're going, an east-west A, which would be the staff's preferred choice at this time, and an east-west B. Back to the working group with some high-level cost-benefit analysis. I think we've got the data in the report. It would just be lifting that out. So that would be part A of the motion, Mr. Chair. Part B would be analysis of business impact by zones and mitigation measures. So not business by business, but if I could, a Richmond Row impact and an analysis with mitigation, and a King Street, particularly a King Street, Budweiser Garden, Covenant Garden, that Talbot, if you will, to Richmond, with mitigation or business impacts and mitigation strategies in consultation with those businesses, and bring that back. And then part C would be that there be a public participation meeting with that data available, so that we're not rehashing what we've rehashed, but we're actually bringing something new forward. So I'm trying to encapsulate everything that we've heard over the last hour and a half or so. And so that would be sort of a three-part motion, and it might move us a step forward. I don't think anyone, Mr. Chair, is arguing about RT versus not RT. That's not the conversation that anyone I hear on this working group. But how do we move the conversation forward, and how do we begin to craft solutions and make decisions? I'd be pleased to work with the clerk.
Yeah, the challenge is that we can't all access screens because we're not all counselors. So we'll have to try to work something here. Okay. And Councillor Park wanted to, before the motion, does anybody mind if people start speaking, and then when we get it up, we can, is that okay? Go ahead.
I was going to speak in support of that motion. I think that we're not quite done having a conversation, but what's quite clear is the working group is quite committed, and council is quite committed to working and moving rapid transit forward in the City of London, because we need it. We've heard quite clearly that we need rapid transit here. I think having this PPM with all the cards on the table is quite important, and I would think that it would be a good thing to have that report public for about 2 weeks before we have a PPM, so that way not only do councillors, the commissioners, but also the public have the time to go through all that information so they can have a really fruitful, meaningful conversation.
All right, I'll just get my clerk, Hubert, to catch up. Anybody else? No?
Yeah, question.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the motion's pretty clear. I'd make a suggestion to Councillor Hubert that you might offer that as a friendly amendment to the chair of the LTC, because the chair didn't indicate that he was entertaining motion this time, and the chair of the LTC did have a motion that she wanted to bring forward. The question that I have is in terms of timing and the ability to provide that business impact analysis, be it individual business or zone. So you can give a sense of, can you do something like that? And if you could do something like that, how much time would it take?
And through the chair, I think we're now all speaking the same language around business impact analysis. We're not talking about predicting changes in revenues or foot traffic, in detail per business. To go through the process of A, B, and C and do it in a way I think that's meaningful, and then we could post as per Tanya, Councillor Park's request as well. I think we'd be looking to come back here in our June meeting. It's going to take a little bit of time if we want to have that up for 2 weeks, and it's probably a good 2 months worth of work plus drafting.
What I understand is going to happen is that the clerk will email the motion to everyone because we're not all on screens, and in that way we can see it. So that might take a couple of minutes.
No problem. I'm wondering if, for the benefit of those who are not going to get it by email, if we could also get it up on the screen so people can see it.
Fair enough. I was thinking that, but I didn't say it.
No, I'll have to say.
I can write it on Bristol board and walk around the room like a ring person.
The following actions.
Okay, committee, the email's gone, so we can have a look at it.
Steve, there might be some changes, so just. Are you? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Your PPM thing is.
Madam Clerk, would that be provided to staff as well? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read it right now for the benefit of people who are here. And the motion is that the following actions be taken with respect to the Rapid Transit Implementation Project. A, 2 alternative routes, including an alternative north-south route and an alternative east-west route be developed. B, analysis of business impacts by zones with mitigation strategies in consultation with businesses and residents be developed. C, civic administration be requested to hold a PPM with the above information included. That's for the benefit of the public. So I'll get the motion moved and seconded, and then we'll enter discussion on the motion. Moved by Chair Ruth, seconder, Councillor Park. Okay. Discussion on the motion? Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to get a clear understanding of the timing of this, because I feel that the longer period that we delay from having a working group meeting, the worse it is. But I do appreciate the fact that we have to give staff time to develop this and discuss this. So what I'm trying to get at is that, okay, so after we leave here today, when would there be another working group meeting? And is it C that will create that working group meeting? Or are we going to see this before C?
April is probably much too early. May 11th, we have a meeting, and then there was the June meeting mentioned. So those are the meetings that we have, Councillor.
Mr. Chair, what I'm trying to get at, though, is that I heard staff said that they needed at least 2 months. And I am trying to figure out, is it 2 months to do A and B? And therefore, is the next meeting that we have scheduled obsolete?
No, we'll continue to have these meetings. This committee will still sit.
Well, if
It's
we
just-
don't have anything to report, how are we going to have meetings? That's all I'm asking.
Well, how about I, as chair, find out if we have things to do and have a next meeting? But I haven't done that yet because I haven't met with anyone from staff to see if we're going to have that meeting, but I think we will continue to have our regular meetings. I think what staff said, and I stand to be corrected, is they could have this back for the June meeting of this committee. And if they want to correct me, that's fine. Maybe it can be earlier. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would need to get some clarification on the intent of A and B. Are we looking at two alternative routes for the entire system or simply within the downtown area? We certainly can report back the way it reads now. We just want to make sure that we understand what the request is from the working group. But the way it reads now, it would not necessarily constrain it north, south, east, west to the downtown area.
My understanding of north-south, based on what I said, was not constrained to the downtown. I didn't mention downtown. I said the north-south route in 1B, so maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
And certainly this is going to go to committee, so we can tweak a little bit of the language between now and committee. But the chair has spoken to what the intent was. Certainly, in my view, it was downtown in terms of the east-west. I'm sorry?
Mover in the seconder for clarification on what it means.
Yeah, well, I crafted the motion.
Chair Ruth, tell us what you meant by the motion. If you can.
I'll try. The motion, as I understood it, was for the downtown up to the end of the tunnel. And east-west taking it off of King, looking at an alternative route from King.
Sorry, just to clarify though, if you just look at the tunnel, then you've got, then you would have a line starting. If you didn't put it there, then how could you start a line then at St. Joseph's Hospital? Anyways,
Sorry, through the chair, if we're to be looking at an east-west alternative and a north-south alternative throughout the entire city, we can certainly look at alternatives in a fairly short period of time to consult by zone with residents and businesses along the entire route for both of those, however, is the TPAP process, and that would take us to the end of the year.
Mr. Chair, if I may. So the intent on the B is not to do what you just said, okay? And my intent is that we would have, when's our meeting in May? Middle of the May? So my intent is not to have this back in June, to have this back in May, and that there be a consultation with business owners on the Richmond Row, say from Oxford Street to Central. How's that? Maybe a little bit further south, okay? Those people, a meeting, talk about what the impacts would be, talk about what mitigation measures might be. Then there'd be a meeting with King Street folks, and we would have a similar conversation. And then maybe we should have a separate conversation with Mr. Usher and Mr. Ohl from the Budweiser and Covenant Garden Market. And it doesn't sound that complicated to me. And work collaboratively. I see those as 3 half-day 2-hour meetings, not going door to door.
Certainly through the chair, that would be our expectation as well. And when we talk about the additional consultation we're advancing, the intent was to meet with some of the major attractors, so the Bud and Covent Garden, for example, and then to do some zone meetings on both King and Richmond along the recommended routes. And those might be block by block or 2 blocks at a time. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, so when I give you an estimate of our time, it's accurate. The other question I would ask is, would the expectation be that we do the same process along the alternative route that we intend to bring back?
Mover?
It depends on what the route is, and so one of them, I suspect, I'm going to talk about the east-west, will be King Street, so you won't be duplicating that. So there may be a conversation that happens along, hypothetically, another east-west street, but that would be in another 2-hour meeting. The raw data is in the report. I read the reports, so the raw data is there.
Councillor Park. Okay, I apologize, Councillor Usher. I'm really doing my best, okay? I will, and I apologize, but I'm doing my best. Yeah, why don't you go ahead then? Yeah, we're fine with you going ahead.
Doesn't matter to me, it's just I wanted to make sure that you understand that I had my hands up too.
People say I very seldom look to the left.
I could use different languages. We got a sheet here with 130 names, and we talk about listening to people and hearing them out. I checked this out, and most of these people are in the downtown. But the area that Councillor Hubert talked about, lots of the names here will be missing. I'm assuming that if these people sign a petition, it's important to them. So I don't want to leave them out unnecessarily. So I just want staff to know that we got this, and they may want to take into consideration what these people have to say. I don't know what kind of meetings they want to have. I don't know how they want to have it. I just want to be able to let these people know that we're listening to them.
All right, I'm sure we can provide the petition to staff and they can see the names and we can go from there. Councillor Park.
Thank you. I think the clarification from the deputy mayor is quite helpful, but in terms of the businesses and residences, they want to know what their days are going to look like when we get the ball rolling on wherever we put the buses. So they need to have that very clearly outlined for them so they have a firm understanding. In terms of the list here, it is quite encompassing of all of downtown, and I can assure you that as a board member of the LDBA, there's going to be block conversations happening with the business community. There's going to be door-to-door visits from the LDBA with the local businesses to convey the information again, because sometimes I need to hear something 3 times for it to sink in, so I can imagine everybody else needs that opportunity also. I have confidence in how we're going to move this forward as a community. I have confidence that our residents are going to support their local businesses because they're the reasons they come into the downtown, and we need to continue to support them. So this isn't the last conversation we're going to have on rapid transit in the broader community, but I'm glad that the level in the room has come down considerably, and I'm going to thank my cup of tea for that.
Councillor Helmer. Now going left, right.
Okay, I hope my colleagues take this very well, but we need to get a lot more specific about what we're talking about. We just got into a discussion about, well, what do we mean by north, south, east, west? Stop using north, south, east, west. Be very specific about what it is we want to see come forward. We have in this report already evaluation of all the different alternatives. So what is it what's coming back to us? The same stuff we've got in front of us? Is what we want to see consultation on those alternatives and explaining exactly what we just did here tonight, but in smaller groups so people can give their feedback and ask their questions? Is that what we want, the public consultation part and the public participation meeting? Or do we want another report from our staff saying the exact same stuff which is in front of us, which is this route is not as good as that route, this is why we prefer this route over these other ones? Because we've got alternatives already in front of us for every possible combination that isn't like technically totally infeasible. So I don't want our staff to go away and take time to do things that they've already done for us. And if we want to be specific about getting feedback on alternatives, we got to be very specific. We have two options right now for the 7 and the L. If you want an alternative in the north corridor, Councillor Squire has been very specific and said 1B, then go and consult on 1B, not just along Richmond, where the 1C is going, but over in the other area where 1B would go, right? And there's not a whole lot of people over there and businesses, but you might get some feedback from those folks who say, hold on, the whole time you've been talking about on Richmond, now you're putting it there. And if you do them all one after another in serial, you know, it's just gonna take forever to get the consultation done. Similarly, if we're gonna talk about going down York, that's one thing. If you're talking about going on Queens instead of King, that's another. So let's just be a bit more specific about it and try and nail down what is it that we wanna do. Because having some focused consultations on two alternatives, 1B in the North Corridor and this other one, either Queens or York, I guess. There's another one, which is just scrap Dundas Place and put it down Dundas. Right? Like nobody's mentioned that, but that's a major constraint we put on the project. You saw the map showing where the ridership is. Like, I mean, we've already made a lot of decisions on that front. I don't really want to rehash it, but it is there. But I would like to be more specific, because right now I don't even know what I'm voting on in terms of directing our staff, especially with Part A. Part B, I think that's really about consulting people and talking about the construction mitigation and so forth. And I think we have to be clear that we're limited in how well we can do that before we make some of the decisions, right? I asked about construction impacts and timing and construction phasing. We don't know yet, right? So getting the kind of detailed level information that the business owners frankly will want to understand what the impacts on their business will be, that's not gonna come until a bit later. So I wanna be clear about what we can and can't accomplish between now and a couple of months from now.
Now I know how the mayor feels trying to run a meeting where people keep talking. I understand now, Mr. Mayor.
Feel my pain?
I feel your pain, Mr. Mayor. Others on this side before I go left? Councillor Hopkins. I'm gonna drop a hint there.
So I do have a question about, regardless of what alternatives we eventually do choose, is this going to create a concern with the funding that we are already undertaking with the provincial and federal governments?
Through the chair to the councillor. So as you know, certainly the committee knows, but for the benefit of the public, for the last 2 years, we have aggressively been pursuing every opportunity for federal and provincial funding. A major milestone of this has been submitting the business plan, which did include specific routes. We've made great progress on that up to the last meeting, which was just a week ago with the provincial minister, and we continue to hear good things. So I'd certainly leave it to the technical folks to speak to what it would look like to really examine alternative routes. But in terms of the message, we continue to iterate that this is our top priority project and we're moving forward. So continuing to show that we're moving in that direction. And my humble advice to you would be that that's really, really important.
Yes.
Through the chair, I'm really compelled by Part A. We have seen alternative after alternative after alternative, and I don't really expect to see anything new come back. So I'm really not sure why that's on the list at all. And while the business impacts by zone and mitigation strategies are very, very important, they are most important once we decide where the route is going to go. And that's what I'm interested in moving forward. And we have seen literally years of analysis on what is the preferred route on a many, many faceted decision-making process. Social, environmental, transit ridership, loading zones, business generators, all those things have already been talked about, and we have come to the preferred routes. And I'm very comfortable with the work that's been done on that. Does there need to be more work and communication done on conveying out the impacts of those preferred routes? Absolutely, and that's where we're at, and that's what's next. But for me, I've seen the routing assessments. I'm happy with those, and I won't be looking to have any more alternatives come back. Thanks.
Anything further? Commissioner?
So I was also confused somewhat by A, because we've seen all these different routes, including the ones that Councillor Squire is curious about on Richmond North. So I mean, the person bringing the motion is no longer here. I was wondering if A actually meant to see more of the numbers behind why the preferred route was the preferred route or something like that, or was it actually new routes? Because new routes makes no sense to me whatsoever. To say, oh, well, why don't we go up Highbury? Because, we can try to build the city over there instead or something, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. Looking at finding out more information about why the preferred route was chosen doesn't seem like a bad thing. It just seems like a delay in why we'll choose the preferred route, because I generally trust data and numbers, and that's what you guys will most likely present, is the data and numbers on why the preferred route was chosen. I have no problem if it's changed to seeing a more in-depth analysis on that, so that the people choosing the routes can be, or when the routes are chosen coming to council, they can see those numbers and say, well, even though there's only this minor variation here, we'd like you to revisit the case. But I don't want to have new numbers go and dug up for those things. It doesn't make sense to me. If it could be changed to something like that, I'd be for it. If it was just to see more detail on why the preferred routes were chosen, that would make more sense to me. The business impacts seems odd to do that, like the other commissioner said, before we know which routes we're taking. I understand that businesses want to have a voice in this, but each business voice amounts to anecdote to me in a situation where we're looking at at large numbers of data and looking at changing a large mode share in the city. And I apologize to each business that may find their anecdote to be super important to them.
Listen, sorry, members of the committee have a
apologize.
right, they have a right to speak, so if you could refrain, please.
I like the numbers and data analysis that's given by the administration of both London Transit and the city in making these decisions. I do know that the business impact needs to be taken seriously, and that we need to mitigate as much as possible to make sure that you have increased numbers of customers to increase your business and make things more economical and profitable for you. And rapid transit does do that. So I don't know why B would need to be done before the decision is made. So those are the two things on this motion that I'm concerned
What I'll
with.
do, because people are expressing, I'll just pull the items separately and people can vote for and against the parts that they like or don't like, okay? Councillor Usher, you want us to go again? Is it something new?
Yeah. Can you give me a light?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I want to make it clear that I'm in favor of this motion, and I want to make it clear that people have spoken and we need to listen. We may feel that we haven't approved anything yet. This has been presented to us and we accepted the presentation, but we have not approved any of this yet. Yes, we approved the north, south, east, west, and that's it. But let's see, let's discuss it with the folks who talk about it, who it affects, and let's see if we could come up with something or explain something to them. We've got to show people that we listen to them, that we hear them and we listen to them. So I'm going to vote in favor of this motion, and I want it to stay there.
Thank you very much. Anybody on the motion? Mr. Mayor, remember my pain, please.
The question I have is to Ms. Sher, and it's a simple one. If A passes, what are you going to do?
Through the chair, we have a lot of information that's been prepared through this whole process. We would provide that information strictly on two routes, likely 1B, I believe, and the recommended east-west, and I would imagine the couplet would be the other one that we would provide that information on as well. We wouldn't be generating new information, it is there, but if you prefer a more concise summary of only those two routes, we can do that. And B will be the start of the conversation with respect to mitigation strategies, because as many people have noted, we don't have all the answers until we have a route to mitigate.
Thank you. And, knowing that and knowing that you understand the motion is small in scope and it's looking at a couple of alternatives for problem areas or potential problem areas that have been identified in the past couple of weeks, I will support A. What I'm not comfortable with is the timeline that would bring this to June. This is really, council's number one priority. You heard Ms. Graham say that that has been communicated to our funding partners consistently for the past 2 years, and that's us talking the talk. And respectfully, us walking the walk is ensuring that it continues to be council's number one priority, and we do everything we possibly can to turn this around as quickly as we can. So I think that sometimes we function within the time allotted, and I would encourage you to set this as an urgent priority. If you need additional resources to bring this in sooner, tell council. I would suspect that council would support that. And it's also a priority for the community. You can tell tonight, we have overflow rooms, we have a full gallery. You can tell by monitoring social media and media, it's a priority for the community. And so I think it would be appropriate for us to resource this to the extent necessary to bring it back as quickly as possible.
And everybody's spoken on it, so. You spoke twice just now. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to call them separately. So we're going to call A first. And the A is that 2 alternative routes, including an alternative north-south. Go ahead, Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. Ms. Scher spoke about the couplet on Queens, presumably Queens and King. Where are they going to join? Like, do we have an idea of where those things would join at this point?
Through the chair, and with hearing the mayor's message loud and clear, this is our number one priority, but we don't have those answers, and that's why we do need some time to deliver it. Certainly, ambitiously, we may be able to do that by May. It'll be very, very high level. We don't have all of the answers. We would need to go through this process.
Thank you. A is 2 alternative routes, including an alternative north-south route and an alternative east-west route be developed. So that's A. We'll call that first. All in favor? Okay. Yes?
Thank you very much, Chair. To my colleagues, I'm not going to support this motion. I wanted to make sure I understood exactly what we're talking about. There's a difference between, hitting the pause button and getting some more feedback on work that we've already done, and hitting the rewind button, which is to go back and start over again with a brand new routing. So this Queens King couplet, I've never seen that. I don't know what we're even talking about. Nobody in my ward has seen anything about a Queens King couplet. We've already gone through all kinds of consultation, and it seems like it was very effective. And I mean, I got a lot of great feedback from people in my ward around the different alternatives that they saw then. Now we're gonna talk about go back something new. So I'm not gonna support it. I got other views about the tunnel, which we can hash out later. But I understand why people wanna do this, but I wanna make sure I'm clear with people why I'm not supporting it.
Sorry if I was short with you, Councillor Helmer, just late in the day, long day. So does anyone else, before I call it, want to speak to the motion? I think, all right, so we're going to call A, and I read it out. Does everybody understand what I read out? Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, against? 1, 2, 3, 4, so that passes 5-4. Am I right on that count? I think so. B will be an analysis of business impacts by zones with mitigation strategies in consultation with businesses and residents be developed. All in favor? That's 6 against, 2. So that passes. And C is that civic administration be requested to hold a PPM with the above information included. And that's self-explanatory. All in favor? Councillor, I'm sorry, 1, 2. That's 9. All against? 0. So A, B, and C all pass. And we'll now move on. Thank you very much. I want to say right now that the mayor was right. I started out on sort of a aggressive note, and I hope people understand. It hasn't been a great couple of days for me, so bear with me on that. We'll now move on to added matter, which is a municipal resolution adopted at the meeting held March 2nd. Somebody wish to move that? Moved by Chair Ruth, seconded by Councillor Hopkins, or Councillor Park. All in favor? That's passed. As far as I know, there are no other matters, so I move for adjournment. All in favor? Chair Ritz, seconded by the mayor. All in favor? We're done. Thank you.